So good evening, everyone. So we are going to do the past 5 years of mains questions of modern Indian history, right? I just need 1 second to get started. So basically, we have what you call as divided the questions into certain themes, right? First of all, I'll make you go through the themes which are there. So overall, 11 or 12 questions have been asked in the past 5 years, right, in the mains. So the first theme, for example, is what you call as EIC administration, whereby the question would relate to either the policy of the East India Company or the conquest of the East India Company, or with respect to what you call as the the impact of the rule of the Britishers, right? So in this category, for example, in 2022, they asked a question regarding that why there were recurrent famines during the rule of the Britishers, right? So therefore, the theme is that what was the impact of the British rule over India? Give reasons. That is first question. Second, for example, again in 2022, why did the armies of the British were so successful against multiple Indian rulers' armies? Right. So therefore, again, it is related to establishment of the empire by the East India Company. So in 2022, most of the questions they asked from pre-1857, and usually students would think that in prelims only questions are asked from pre-1857. Mains questions are only post-1857. This is how UPSC surprised the rote learners, right? Then again, within this particular theme, we can also talk about resentment and revolts against the company and the British rule, whereby the major topic is pre-1857 and post-1857 revolts by the tribals and the peasants, right? So how did the colonial rule affect the tribals in India, and what was the tribal response to the colonial oppression, right? So question is very, very simple, right? That is, what were the reasons for the tribal revolt and what were the methods of the tribal revolt, or right? So us tarike se. The question is not very complex, but if that topic it is properly understood, and if the student has the capacity to summarize that topic, because there are so many tribal revolts which took place. So if you'll start writing the tribal revolt, so therefore the word limit will end and you'll not be able to conclude properly. Then 1857 uprising was culmination of many small and big rebellions in the first 100 years of the British rule, right? So again, here the question is basically asking you that I want you to prove that 1857 revolt was similar in nature, that is similar in its reasons and similar in its methods and similar in its leadership with the pre-1857 revolts, that is the revolts which took place from 1757 to 1857, right? So therefore, a student who has clear understanding of the reasons of the pre-1857 revolts and the reasons of the 1857 revolt would be able to highlight that, see, similarity is there. Second, student who has clarity over the what were the methods which were used in the pre-1857 revolts, who were the leaders of the pre-1857 revolts, not the names of the leaders, but from which particular section of the society these leaders came, and then comparing with the people who provided leadership in the 1857 revolt, right? So therefore, this kind of comparison, if it is done, then the student will be able to conclude that, see, 1857 revolt in fact was one of the biggest peasant revolt, right? You would be able to conclude that. So that is again impact of the British rule, right? So therefore, these three questions have been asked in the past 5 years with respect to the establishment of the East India Company's rule, that is conquest, and then the consequences of the British rule, right? So how did the conquest took place, and then when after conquest the ruling began, so therefore what was the impact of the rule, right? So these three questions are asked. Then this topic, socio-religious reforms, right? So from this topic in 2021 they asked that trace the rise and growth of socio-religious reform movements with special reference to Young Bengal and Brahmo Samaj, right? That means student requires two kind of understandings. A, an overall understanding, because that is the first half of the question. The student should be able to see, trace the rise. That is when the car started. So therefore, who started the car? How much fuel was there in the car? What was the speed in the car? Did the car reach a top speed at any point of time? Right? That is the car of social reforms, right? Trace the rise and growth of socio-religious reforms. That is your movie. And in that movie, however, your two heroes are Young Bengal and Brahmo Samaj. That means while you are mentioning the overall concept, within that overall concept, the two major themes, or you would have to pick out examples from Young Bengal and Brahmo Samaj. If you're able to do that, then your thing will be done, right? When we discuss the question, then I'll mention how you can go about it. Then another question was there in 2019 from the social reforms, that is examine the linkages between the 19th century's Indian Renaissance, that is nothing but socio-religious reforms which began in the 1800s, and the emergence of the national identity. Right? Emergence of national identity. That means earlier a national identity was absent and now emergence of national identity. Who will be able to answer? The student who knows what is the meaning of the word national identity. Two words are there. One word is identity, another word is national. The student who actually knows that what is the meaning of the word identity and what is the meaning of the word nation will actually be able to answer this question. Otherwise, you will not be able to answer this question. As simple as that. Right? What is national identity? Nation is summation of people who feel one, equal and supreme. Liberty, supreme. Equality, equal. Fraternity, oneness. Nation is summation of people who feel one, equal and supreme. So therefore this feeling, right, in the heart, that is the emotion aspect, and in the mind, that intellectually also without any emotion, you feel that we are one people. Right? So therefore how that was generated by these social reforms. Right? So therefore that student will be able to answer this particular question. Right? Identity. Right? Anyways, I'll discuss this when we discuss the answer, but I'm just giving you a trailer that what should be the thought process, so that overall in this session we are trying to discuss the last 5 years PYQs. So therefore a student should at the beginning itself be able to have a trend in mind that okay, what is the overall focus. That's why it's kind of like a trailer right now. Right? Answer in 150 words. Right. So therefore, two questions were asked from the social reforms. One is related to what you call as emergence of national identity, that is cultural identity. Second, again, is kind of like similar, right, whereby you're talking about the how of the social reforms here, and there you're talking about the impact of the social reforms. Whenever there is any topic in humanities, usually the topic can be construed, its short notes can be made in this particular format. Event, right? On the left hand side, reasons of the event. On the right hand side, consequences of the event. Usually these two are the most important aspects. Most of the questions in UPSC prelims and mains, they are asked from these areas. So इनका note सबसे ज़्यादा important होता है. In the middle there is how of the event. Right? So एक event हुआ क्यों, general studies है ना, it's not very complex. How, why a particular event happened, how it happened, and why we are studying it today, or why it needs to be studied, what were its consequences, that is what was its importance. Right? So reason, how, and consequence. Right? So therefore if you notice, and I'm going to prove it to you, right, this is not like random things I'm saying. In this particular question, if you see, this particular question is from the impact part. That is, if social reforms happened, then what was the impact? One of the important impact was development of national identity. So how? Right? So therefore that comes from the impact part. And this element, that is trace the rise and the growth of social reforms, rise, there you would have to see why social reforms happen. Right? And so it is a mixture of why and the how part. Right? So most of the questions, they can be classified like this, and our notes should also always be ultimately be organized in this particular format. Right? The rise of nationalism, that is the moderate phase. So Indian national movement, it can be divided into three parts. Right? One part is moderate phase. Now most of the students, they do not know what is moderate phase. They confuse moderate phase with what you call as Indian National Congress 1885 till 1905, beginning of Swadeshi movement. They feel that is the moderate phase. No, that is the moderate phase of Indian National Congress. But if we are thinking about the moderate phase of the Indian national movement, that is the Indian national movie, that is the whole movie, then that moderate phase, by irrespective of whether you are part of Indian National Congress or not, you are moderate. Surendranath Banerjee, before joining the Congress, was he not a moderate? Huh? Or suddenly when he joined Congress, then suddenly वक्त बदल गए, हालात बदल गए, जज्बात बदल गए randomly. है ना, ऐसा तो नहीं होगा ना. You are a moderate A as part of regional organization, then you are a moderate as part of an all India organization. That is the only difference, that you are getting more organized, but your thoughts, the kind of methods that you believe in, the kind of goals which you have, they will kind of remain the same, right? So moderate phase is there from 1851, right, till your 1905. Moderate phase of Indian national movement. Moderate phase of Indian National Congress is from 1885 to 1905, right? So in the last 5 years, no question has been asked from what you call as the pre-1885 era, but otherwise in the past there has been a question that traced the rise of the Indian national movement until formation of Congress. Had that question been asked in the last 5 years, that question would have found place here, right? That is, before establishment of the Congress, how did the Indian national movement go? So fine, here the question is, to what extent did the role of the moderates prepare a base for the wider freedom movement? So basically topic is moderates. So why moderates came into existence, what were their goals, methods, right? And then what was their impact? So therefore this particular question is again from the impact, that moderates operated whichever they wanted, whichever way they thought was the best to operate, but ultimately what was the net result? How did they contribute to the INM, right? So therefore positives of the moderates here, primarily we'll be talking about the drain theory. That was their biggest contribution. Second, it was more of a proof of their failure, the Indian Councils Act 1892, because it did not meet any of their demands, right? And third, formation of an all India organization, that is Indian National Congress, right? So these three are the major achievements of the moderates, right? So they developed the economic critique, okay? In 2020, they asked, evaluate the policies of Curzon and their long-term implications on the national movement, right? So therefore, this is basically, I would have classified better it in the form of, let's say, extremist phase. We can have, in the pre-Gandhian era, we can divide it into moderates plus extremists. So this question is from the extremist phase, that is transition from the moderate to the extremist phase. So this question is primarily about the Swadeshi movement, right? Why? Because Curzon 9905, that is 1899 to 1905, Curzon was the viceroy, right? And the major decision that he took was of Bengal partition. But a student who knows some of the other policies of Curzon, for example, Indian Universities Act of 1904, whereby he said that universities are sedition factories, right? And therefore he brought the universities under control, right? Calcutta Municipal Corporation Amendment Act, whereby he reduced the number of elected members, right? Hanji, number of elected members in the municipalities, right? So therefore those will, what you call as, add 1 mark, because the primary focus of the question is not on Swadeshi movement, but yes, it's not only Swadeshi movement, although the primary focus is Swadeshi movement. Long-term implication on the national movement. So well, Curzon's policy, his partition of Bengal, that resulted in what you call as Swadeshi movement, that resulted in great change in the methods of the INM, that is, we adopted civil disobedience, non-cooperation. Gandhian era, that is 1920 onwards, it is called as Gandhian era. If you want to be really specific, it should be 1919 onwards, because Rowlatt Satyagraha was by Mahatma Gandhi from 1919. So here in 2023, they asked, what was the difference between Mahatma Gandhi and Tagore in their approach towards education and nationalism, right? So basically this question is not from, in my perspective, right? And by my perspective is like, I follow logic. Logically, did Rabindranath Tagore contribute to the INM? No. Did Rabindranath Tagore contribute to any big social reforms? Answer is no. His primary contribution was to art and culture and to the ideas, that is philosophical domain, right? So therefore, I would be using Rabindranath Tagore's ideas of internationalism, right, and universal brotherhood more in, let's say, ethics, right? So therefore, UPSC has started asking questions which is based on interconnections, not just within the subject of modern history, but also within the subject of modern history and world history, and also within the subjects of ethics and what you call as because a student primarily would study about Rabindranath Tagore in the ethics part. But I would have studied him like that, because otherwise his contribution to the INM as such is not there. The study of modern history is more about social reforms and the political aspect, that is taking control over the state. So there we can compare the two personalities, right? What does the student learn from here? If UPSC can ask a question on MG and RBT, Rabindranath Tagore, right? Then why cannot UPSC ask a question comparing Mahatma Gandhi with others? Mahatma Gandhi versus Swami Vivekananda, Mahatma Gandhi versus Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and UPSC has asked. If you go beyond the 5 years, UPSC has asked that how Mahatma Gandhi was Bal Gangadhar Tilak 2.0. Right? So basically that was the spirit of the question, that trace the similarities between Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Gandhiji. right? So similarly, Gandhiji versus Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Gandhiji versus Jawaharlal Nehru, Gandhiji versus Swami Vivekananda, Swami Dayanand Saraswati. Why Swami Dayanand Saraswati? Because in 2020, 2020 nahi, in 2022 or so, the government of India celebrated anniversary of Swami Dayanand Saraswati. Right. So therefore, a student should, wonder that were there any similarities or differences. The concept of ahimsa was popularized by Swami Dayanand Saraswati. The concept of Swarajya, it was there also in the ideas of Swami Dayanand Saraswati. Right. तो उस तरीके से we should prepare our notes. That's how we should study the PYQs. That is analogy के basis पे. Bring out the constructive work program of Mahatma Gandhi during the non-cooperation movement and civil disobedience movement. Right. Bang on. मस्त मजा आया मुझे तो question देख के, because history is all, or UPSC is all about patterns. Right, and as soon as I noticed the pattern, that time and again this constructive work is taking place. So therefore, when I started teaching, I ensured that this becomes part of our what you call as curriculum, and extra focus on what is constructive work. So constructive work is NGO-like activity, extra tabulation that okay, see, this is how constructive work is taking place in a Swadeshi movement. This is how constructive work is taking place in non-cooperation movement. This is how constructive work is taking place from 1928. There was this constructive work resolution which was passed by Congress right before the civil disobedience movement of 1930. So therefore, I was very happy that UPSC is rewarding curiosity, right? So therefore, wherever there is a pattern which emerges, there lies a future year question, right? So therefore, my session in my classes, our classes are usually not about PYQs, they are about FYQs, future year questions. Fine, it can be very easily answered. Then you have, since the decade of 1920s, the national movement acquired various ideological strands and thereby expanded its social base. Discuss. So a student who knows what is the meaning of social base, what is the meaning of the word ideology, right? So for example, let's say you get really inspired by Gandhiji, you get really inspired by Bhagat Singh, you get really inspired by the communists, right? So therefore, you are three followers of three different kind of ideologies. Right? So therefore, you need to now say that from 1920 onwards, how there was rise of communists or communist ideology, revolutionaries, there was rise of Gandhian thought process, right? And there was also rise of what you call as left-wing ideology within the Congress, and how that expanded the social base. Right, so social base may obviously you would have to talk about that. Okay, different schools of thought, they attracted which kind of people and how. Right, so like communists, they would attract the poor workers primarily more, right? Then communists, they also set up what you call as details, but they also focused upon attracting the poor ryots, right? Mahatma Gandhi was like a mass leader, he attracted everyone. Okay, youth was attracted by the revolutionaries, right? So therefore, this is how you can talk about it. You would have to trace the rise of different ideologies. Then many voices had strengthened and enriched the nationalist movement during the Gandhian phase. Elaborate. Very similar question. In fact, I am pretty surprised that very similar question asked back to back, 2019 and 2020. Kind of like same question, right? Many voices had strengthened. Well, here the focus in that question, the focus is more on ideology. Here the focus is more on follower of the ideology. Right, that is where we want to talk about, let's say, working class raising their voice, ryots raising their voice, women raising their voice, became part of the Indian national movement, capitalists raising their voice, became part of Indian national movement, right? So the topic remains the same, just that in one case the focus on ideology is going to be more, in another case the focus on the follower is going to be more, right? So many voices of nation had strengthened. That is how did they contribute to the Indian national movement from 1920 onwards. Okay. Then transfer of power, that is the last phase from World War II till 1947. So here assess the role of British imperial power in complicating the process of transfer of power during the 1940s. Here the word India is not mentioned, right? And both are part of GS paper 1, right? So therefore, in one of our videos of the past, we have answered this question in one video from the perspective of world history and in another video from the perspective of modern history. Right, because transfer of power was taking place not just in India, it was taking place in some other colonies also. For example, you can take the example of Israel, and to be on the safer side, maybe you can allocate one small paragraph as a concluding paragraph that this happened not just in India, but it also happened in Israel, right? So then fine, you can be placed safe. So these are the questions which are there, and therefore this is how we are going to deal with these questions, right? So let us begin theme wise. Right. So the first one that we have is EIC administration or the EIC policies, right? So the first question is this one. 2022, why was there a sudden spurt in famines in colonial India since mid 18th century? Right. So the question is, मैं यहाँ से देख लेता हूँ अपना जो question है. हाँ. Why was there a sudden spurt of famines in colonial India? Right. So basically the question is, why famines since mid 18th century, that is from 1750s, right? So basically they are talking about the rule of the East India Company. When did the rule of East India Company begin? They got the power to rule in 1700. Well, basically conquest began in 1757. Rule later began, but fine. So why famines in British era? Right, that is the primary question. So how should be our thought process here? Right, our thought process should be that first of all, in our mind, when we are making rough notes, let's say, when we are trying to think either in the written format, we are trying to think about the structure of the answer, or mentally we are trying to think about the structure of the answer. Structure of the answer should be the first thing which we should try to do. There should be a plan before we move ahead. So therefore, what are famines? How do we define famines? That is one aspect. Now famine is basically what? Famine is a it is a multiplicative factor of a nature multiplied by the human factor. Nature, for example, let's say droughts take place, then the human factor, if huge amount of food grains are stored with the state, then the state can provide those food grains and famine will not take place, people will not die. That is if positive human factor is there, right? So basically it is equal to what you call as nature factor multiplied by human factor, right? Human may, one comes the state or the government, and second come the people themselves. If the people are very rich, then they would create demand, and food products, they would be imported from outside of a particular country or from a province, right? And therefore they will be able to pay for the high price. When the supply goes down, then the prices they go high. If the people they have buying power, well, they will have enough buying power to get it imported from the outside, right? So either the state works for them or the people they work for them. At times, let's say there is no nature factor and there is only human factor, then also famine can take place. Bengal famine 1943, there was no droughts or anything as such, but food was exported from India to Europe, where the European armies were fighting. That is, the lives of the Europeans were prioritized, and as a result 50 lakh Indians died in the Bengal famine of 1943. That means nature factor was missing, but the human factor was so negative from the side of the government or the state that a famine took place, right? So therefore that is the whole idea of this particular question. Okay? So that should be the first thought process. Apart from that, as in terms of, okay, so we have to focus on the this part, government part, and how the people, they became, because nature wise so fine that that thing, it is not under our control. So how did the government play a negative role, and how the people were looted so much that the people, they did not have any money to basically be able to act as consumer or buyer of a highly priced food crops, right, coming from the outside, right? So therefore that is what is there, right? Second aspect, so how did this happen? So mentally we have defined that, okay, what is famine. Second aspect that comes into operation is, okay, middle of 1750s. So plunder, Plassey plunder began from 1757. That is, the Britishers, they started looting India, right? And when they loot India, so therefore the money is going down with the people of India, right? That is, their buying capacity, their savings are coming down, and therefore even if a single drought will take place, there will be food shortage and they'll not be able to fend for themselves, right? So therefore then you basically, your theme begins that how government A took away money from the people, and second, when people, they don't have any money and let's say a bad nature event happens, at that point of time, how the government did not do anything for the people, right? So negative role of the government with respect to taking care of a famine when famine takes place, and negative role of the government in making the people go kangal, right? So how did the government made the people go kangal? Kangal, you understand? Kangal, right? So therefore there, our thought process should be like that. To begin with, there's a topic called Plassey plunder, and Plassey plunder took place from 1757 till 1765, where huge amount of money was looted by putting a gun to the head of Nawab of Bengal, and huge amount of political gifts were extracted for him. And as a result, people, how does the Nawab have any money? It is a taxpayer money, right? State is an organization which rules a territory and the people on that territory. And every organization can have a bank account. The bank account of the state is called public exchequer. And how does money enters into it? It is basically taxpayer money. Primarily it is taxpayer money, right? So therefore when Britishers, they put a gun to the head of Nawab of Bengal, so Nawab of Bengal will be giving the taxpayer money. That means the people, their pockets are getting lighter, right, during the Plassey plunder. Then the company got a regular plunder, is not systematic. Today I put a gun to your head and I make you pay money. So there is no system. System wise, they got a second income from 1765 when they got Diwani. And therefore this Diwani resulted in a second income. One income was trade income. Second income was land revenue of the richest province of India, that is Bengal, right? So therefore now systemic loot will happen. So this was unorganized loot of the Indian people. This is organized loot of the Indian people, right? So therefore Diwani, it will lead to systemic loot. It will begin, right? Organized loot will begin. Now every year the people, they have to pay land revenue to the British state, right? So therefore this is how people are, right? And therefore in 1770 what happened? Great Bengal famine of 1770, where 1 crore Indians died because of famine. Continuously for 3 years droughts was there, and that is the negative human natural factor was there, but the government did not do anything. That is what East India Company did. When there was famine, East India Company doubled the LR demand, doubled the land revenue demand. So therefore we get to know that how the state is behaving. Rather than doing something for the people, they are trying to maximize their earnings, right? And they are using very harsh methods for tax collection. They would beat the people till the point of time that they die, then they put their dead bodies on the chaurahas, right, whereby vultures and crows will be eating the dead bodies. So a message is given to the larger population that famine or no famine, you have to pay up this land revenue, right? So therefore that is the behavior of the government which is there, right? Then fine, we move ahead. The loot is to be discussed if we move ahead chronologically. So then if we think about, let's say, Awadh, right? So in the case of Awadh, or in any case where subordinate alliance was signed, the amount of subsidy was very, very high, and the amount of subsidy demanded continuously increased. And in the case of Awadh, though, even despite permanent payment of subsidy, by giving half of Awadh, Still more subsidy was demanded. That is, Britishers are not respecting their own giving word also, right? So be it Awadh or be it any state which has signed subordinate alliance, there what is the issue? The issue it is of A, high, and second, continuously growing subsidy. Why subsidy was paid? To pay up for the army which is maintained by the East India Company. Nawab will pay money how? Obviously by taking high amount of land revenue from the people. So therefore this will lead to what? This will lead to very high amount of land revenue and therefore peasant distress. When land revenue is very, very high, see what is happening. Because India was agrarian economy. Because India was agrarian economy, then these people, they are not just what you call as consumers. We have till now thought about them as consumers with buying power. Consumers with buying power. But see, if our economy is agrarian economy, then what do the masses do for their occupation, for their livelihood? They are ryots. Ryots means they are peasants. They are producers. And if these people, they do not have any money, then they also do not have any money to purchase seeds, maybe to purchase better quality seeds, maybe to hire labor on time, right? So therefore, if the producer of the good in the economy is bereft of money, then how the production will take place, right? For example, later on in the civil disobedience movement, it is said that because of the Great Depression of 1929, such a situation was there that peasants, they had to sell a part of their land. Why? To get money for the sowing season. That is to hire labor, to buy seeds, right? So therefore, this people or the masses in agrarian economy, they are not just consumers whose buying power is going to be taken away by the British, and therefore they will not be able to afford high priced inflated food products whenever a drought takes place. But they are also producers who also do not have money. So see, a cycle will get created that high land revenue will basically not just make the masses go under poverty, but that will also make the producer produce less, right? So therefore that is what is happening. So in the case of Awadh, this happened. Then third aspect, we can also talk about the land revenue system. Since we are talking about LR, then we can also talk about the land revenue systems. Next paragraph can be about the land revenue systems of the Britishers. And in the land revenue systems, for example, first sub point we can talk about the Permanent Settlement Act of 1793. So in the Permanent Settlement Act of 1793, ultimately what was the situation? A, the Patta system was not respected. Patta system was not respected. Second, that what is the Patta system? Patta system basically means your rent agreement. You are a tenant. Right now, all of you are tenant. So therefore, your rent agreement is your Patta. You open the rent agreement, on the first page itself, it will be written what is recorded, the amount of rent that you have to pay. And therefore, the landlord, he should be called house lord, but he's called landlord. Why? Because that terminology is coming from the past. And the landlord cannot take more than what is recorded in the Patta. In fact, the next increase is also recorded. That is after 11 months, if you are going to stay in that same house, then rent will increase by 10%, right? So Patta system has the rent, and second, also the percentage increase or future increase, right? So that can also be there. Fine. This is abhi to Patta system mein rent is recorded. So in the permanent settlement system, the Patta system was not respected or it was not followed because the law, that is the Permanent Settlement Act of 1793, did not protect the rights of the ryots, and the zamindar could extract any amount of money from the ryot. Second, we know that there was high rents, illegal abwabs, right? So therefore, as a result, the masses, that is the tenants, they are going to be oppressed because of this particular land revenue system. You can also mention a small thing about farming system of 1772. It continued roughly till 1793. Here, the revenue farmers, They got the right to collect land revenue in the auctions, and they over extracted land revenue from the ryots, right? So therefore that is happening immediately after the Great Bengal famine of 1770. इसको पहले लिखना चाहिए था, इसको बाद में लिखना चाहिए था. Then in the case of Ryotwari areas and Mehlwari areas, the government always keeps or always kept the land revenue very, very high. Because the land revenue was high, therefore to prevent the sale of my land in auctions, I used to take loans from the money lenders. But the money lenders used to give loan at very, very high interest rate, and therefore ultimately there will be a point of time that I'll not be able to pay the EMI to the money lender, and then the money lender will take away my land. Why? Because वो मैंने गिरवी रखा था, right? So basically I mortgaged the land, and only then I was able to get the loan. If I have not paid the loan, then my land will go. That means either because of high land revenue, there was landlessness, or because of indebtedness, I was landlessness, right? And being landless also represents the people not having any property or people not having any buying power. So therefore, that's how you can mention that the land revenue systems of the Britishers, they exploited the masses, right? Then further what you can talk about is, apart from the land revenue systems, so land revenue systems, they slightly gradually start becoming less important as a source of income for the government, and gradually from 1813 onwards, westernization of the Indian economy began, and therefore we talk about, let's say, we can talk about the drain theory here, right? So basically, drain theory, it operated primarily from mid of 19th century, and here you can talk about that how even the urban masses, even those who are not ryots, right, they are also hurt. That is, deindustrialization of India's handicraft sector happened. Deindustrialization of handicraft sector took place, right? And why this is taking place? Because the government is not giving any protection, or government not bringing protective tariffs. The first time the protective custom duties were brought, that was during the World War I, right? As a result, there was dumping of the British goods into the Indian economy. Now these goods are cheaper in price and later better in quality also. Initially they were not better in quality, but later they were. As a result, no one is buying an artisan's product. So if no one is buying the artisan's product, so what will the artisan do, right? He will be under poverty, and maybe he will go back to villages, and therefore the agriculture sector will be overburdened. The agriculture sector does not require so much amount of labor, but what does the artisan do? He has no other option to meet his livelihood. That's why he go back to his village, और अपनी family में हिस्सा मांगता है कि बड़े भैया मेरा हिस्सा दो. Why? Because I also need my plot, because my work is not going on. So therefore the agriculture sector got overburdened. He was ready to get transformed. The artisan was ready to get transformed into modern worker. Worker uses physical labor, right? Worker uses physical labor, works on a machine. Artisan uses his art and hands and works in the handicrafts sector to produce crafts, right? So that is the difference between an artisan and a modern worker, right? Physical labor versus kala, right? Now he was ready to transform himself, that okay, I'll also do physical labor, but if he'll go around searching factory, industrialization of India did not take place. Factories were not there. So therefore, wo bichara kya kare? He will go back to his home, right? That is in the rural area, right? So agriculture sector overburdened. Why agriculture sector overburdened? Because IR did not take place in India. That is, industrialization of India, modern industrialization of India did not happen, and handicraft sector was deindustrialized, and as a result these masses are below poverty and more prone to a famine, right? More prone to a famine. Then apart from that, another aspect you can mention that fine, there the government is saying grow cash crops. That is, instead of growing food crops, grow cash crops, because the purpose of the Britishers was that India should act as a source of raw material. So the British factories, they require raw cotton, British factories, they require raw jute, right? So therefore you are not going to grow bajra, jowar, wheat, etc. You are going to grow cash crops, right? Indigo is just one of the example, but indigo and other kind of cash crops, especially later on raw cotton, right? So therefore the government and government state is very powerful, so therefore government focused on cash crops, right, rather than food crops. Food crops are not prioritized, cash crops are prioritized, right? So that will obviously hurt the supply of the food in the Indian food market, right? Another thing which is going to hurt the supply, see, you can also think like this. Till now, if you notice, we have talked about what you call as the demand side factors. That is, if people are poor, then they will not be able to have buying power. Demand side factors. Now see, here we are talking about, let's say, supply side factors, right? So here the supply of the food crops is coming down. Then in the drain theory, the moderates also highlighted that how government acted in a selfish and greedy manner. They did not build canals in permanent settlement areas. In permanent settlement areas. Which were these permanent settlement areas? Bengal, Odisha, Bihar, Banaras, North Madras. And canals were built only in the Melwari and Ryotwari areas. What was the reason? In the permanent settlement areas, the income of the state was permanently fixed at an absolute amount. That means if the income of the ryots will increase or income of the zamindars will increase, the income of the state will not increase, because land revenue was not in percentage terms. When tax is in percentage terms, your income is more, state's income is also more, right? But there the land revenue was an absolute amount, that is in rupees, right? And it cannot be changed because it was permanently assessed. So government thought, ki what do I gain by setting up canals in the permanent settlement areas? I will gain if foreign direct investment will take place in Melwari and Ryotwari areas, because there the LR, A, it is in percentage terms, B, it is revisable, right? So therefore, as a result, even till now, Bihar, Bimaru state, why? Because there was huge amount of backlog with respect to agrarian development in Bihar, right? Because Bengal, Odisha, Bihar, part of Bengal Suba, right? So therefore, these states usually not that. So no canals are, so this is also going to hurt the supply side of the things, right? Then Britishers, they continuously fought wars. If you notice that Britishers, they continuously fought wars, and war expenditure therefore will be very, very high. How does the government meet the war expenditure? By increasing taxes. So in general, the taxes, apart from the land revenue, other taxes also, in general, they stayed high, because continuously wars are being fought. After 1858, for example, Lytton's Afghan adventure, right? Second Anglo-Afghan war is being fought, right? Then World War I, 1914 till 1919, very big war, right? Then Second World War, after 1858, wars थोड़े से कम हो जाते हैं, but then what you call as this thing is very high. मतलब जब wars होते हैं तो wars are like world wars, right? In 1900s, right? So therefore, taxes were high because another reason was wars led to high taxes and high land revenue, because the government would be required to meet the war expenditure, and government will get money only through taxes. So that is another factor which is there. And lastly, you can conclude by saying that Indian lives didn't matter for the British. That was another reason which was there, right? How did the Indian lives did not matter? So therefore, you can conclude that famines recurrently took place. You can in fact come out with this sentence that British rule began with Great Bengal famine of 1770. Then throughout the British rule, there were recurrent famines. Example, in 1876, there was this great Madras famine where 1.6 crore Indians died. And British इतने मनहूस थे that even before they left, just 4 years before they left, in 1943, there was this Bengal famine where 50 lakh Indians died. So we have the starting point, we have a middle point, and we have a ending point. And therefore this proves our previous arguments, right? And Indian lives did not matter. For example, here they doubled the land revenue. A very oppressive farming system is brought just 2 years later, right? When this 1876 Madras famine is taking place, Lytton has money. Lytton 7680 means 1876 to 1880. Lytton has money to fight second Anglo-Afghan war. That's why it is called Lytton's Afghan adventure. Adventure is something which is avoidable. Don't be so adventurous. That means you're taking unnecessary risks, right? So therefore 1878 till 1880, 78 से 82 या 80, 1878 38 से 42, हाँ, 1878 से 80, second Anglo-Afghan war was there. He's wasting the money here. He could have bought the food grains for the people. He's holding 1877 Delhi Darbar or Imperial Darbar, where Queen Victoria got corona. TD हो ही जाता कोरोना तो अच्छा होता, नहीं नहीं. Yes to Queen Victoria corona, no to Queen Victoria corona. Yes. Got coronated. So therefore this Imperial Darbar or Delhi Darbar is like, Republic Day celebration. And we all know that how much amount of expenditure takes place in a Republic Day, right? So therefore that kind of preparation, just that in the place of President of India, it is going to be Queen Victoria, right? So 1877 Delhi Darbar or Imperial Darbar, this is what he is doing. So he has time for this, he has money for this. When famines are taking place in Madras, 1.6 crore Indians are dying there. Cannibalism was reported. People started eating people. There's a famous photograph, a frail man trying to protect his children. From who? From people. Cannibalism. That was reported in 1770 also in Bengal. That was reported in 1876 in Madras also. That was the level, right? And Indian lives did not matter. Why? Because food was required for Europeans who are displaced by Hitler. So Jewish lives matter. Palestinians' lives matter. Our lives, they don't matter. African lives don't matter. South American lives, right? Because what matters? Power matters. As simple as that. तो जब तक तेल है तब तक Palestinian lives matter. And till the point of time in US, Jewish people, they control these companies, etc. Only power matters, right? As I say, a rich lady sleeping, sleeping beauty. A poor lady sleeping, family members put water on the face and they're like, get up! Abhi tak so rahi hai. So therefore, in the case of rich people, sleeping beauty, a prince will come to wake her up. A poor girl wakes up with patak, right? So therefore, only power matters, right? So Indian lives, they did not matter, right? And this is what that's why they're sending the food away and therefore deliberately creating this thing, right? So fine. So this becomes our map. Obviously, I'm making very elaborate. Why? Because if I make tuck maps, so like, acho, kya ho gaya, right? But this is a thought process which is there, right? In UPSC, initially we should behave like tortoise, right? Once we perfect the things, then the same thing we'll be able to do in a fast manner, right? So this is what is there. If we do a review of whatever we have written, right? So this becomes our structure in the exam. Once with multiple revision, you'll be able to make this structure very, very fast. So therefore your introduction can be, let's say, a definition of famines, or maybe after making this structure, you can say, this is a very brilliant definition or introduction that the British rule began with Great Bengal famine 1770, or 5 years after beginning of the British rule, there was Great Bengal famine of 1770. During the British rule, there was Madras famine where 1.6 crore Indians died, and just 4 years before the British left, there was Bengal famine of 1943 where 50 lakh Indians died. Following were the reasons for these recurrent famines. Right? So therefore, this is how through interconnections you can come out with good introductions. Right? And then fine, you adopt a chronological approach, and there you talk about how the Britishers they brought poverty to the Indians, right? And then first paragraph you can mention the Plassey plunder. You can talk about very high amount of land revenue because of subsidy. So therefore this resulted in problem not just in British India but even in princely states. See, now in the second iteration you can come out with better and crisper sentences. Right, there were two Indias. One was British India, second was princely states. Subordinate alliance is issue of princely states. So therefore their high subsidy is creating tensions in the princely states also. Right, then you can mention the land revenue systems were very oppressive. Example, in permanent settlement, the rights of the ryots were not respected. They were not given by law. Patta system was not respected, and as a result, there were very high rents. Ownership rights were given only to the zamidar, and ryots were not given occupancy rights, and illegal avabs continued. Similarly, in farming system of 1772, operation by the Ijardars took place, and in Ryotwari and Mehelwari, though Ryot was given ownership of land, but because of higher land revenue, either they lost land in auctions or ultimately to moneylender due to indebtedness. Right? Then as the British economy industrialized, the drain of wealth from India took different format. Now India became a source of raw material and export markets. And Indian finished goods of the Indian handicraft sector, they were defeated in market competition by the cheap and better quality machine made products, leading to deindustrialization of the handicraft sector. The British state or the government brought no protective tariffs to safeguard Indian handicraft sector. As a result, full stop. Also, industrialization of India was not a priority for the state. As a result, not just the GDP remained stagnant, but the agriculture sector also got overburdened, further elevating poverty. Even within the agriculture sector, primary focus of the government was cash crops and not food crops. That hurt the supply of food in the economy. Canals were primarily built in non-permanent settlement areas because LR was permanently assessed and government income could not increase in permanent settlement areas. There were continuous wars during the rule of English East India Company, and then Anglo-Afghan wars during the Anglo-Afghan wars, the two world wars during the rule of British state. That, and therefore, due to recurrent wars, the taxes were continuously kept high. Last में conclusion में you can mention that the state did not do enough whenever it could. So इस तरीके से you can come out, right? So therefore this is how we deal with the first question which is there. Now what is the second question? The second question, it is about what you call as. So second question was from 2022. Why did the armies of British East India Company, mostly comprising of Indian soldiers, right? That means the UPSC is asking us that do not give me this thing that it is what you call as some kind of racism. So वहाँ भी Indian थे, यहाँ भी Indians थे. In the British East India Company's army also, Indian soldiers were there, and in the Indian rulers' armies also, Indian soldiers were there, right? So that means you have to focus on something else. Win consistently. Why did the armies of British East India Company win consistently against the more numerous and better equipped armies of Indian rulers, right? The better equipped armies of Indian rulers, better in terms of, see, many of the Indian rulers, they modernized their militaries also. So fine, it is more about numbers, give reasons, right? So simply that is the issue which is there. So how can we, so basically the question is how East India Company was able to, in simple language, the question is how a company was able to conquer India. As simple as that, right? They are giving it in a good, right? With slightly focus on numerous Indian armies, etc. So how conquest is possible is the next question which came in 2022, right? So if you think, right, let us start thinking. इधर सुन लो मेरी बात, नहीं सुननी तुम तो सुन लो. मेरी क्लास में बैठोगे तो हर किसी सुनना पड़ेगा. स्टाफ को भी सुनना पड़ेगा, सबको सुनना पड़ेगा. Anyways, in 1686, when the English East India Company attacked Mughals in Bengal, they were thrashed left and right and center. In fact, they were made to pay 1.5 lakh rupees as compensation. Right? They were like, sorry, and they were pardoned. That means it was not always the case that the Britishers or the company was able to defeat India. So what was the situation? The situation was that if India was united in form of one strong center, then a tiny si piddi si company would not have been able to defeat us. But by 1750s, India got divided into multiple regional powers. That is successor states, Bengal, Awadh, Hyderabad. Rebel states, Marathas, Sikh, Jats, Afghans, Rohilla Afghans, and Bangash Pathans of Farrukhabad. And third, the already autonomous states, that is Mysore, Rajputs, Travancore. Right? And there was no one single center who would be commanding army of whole of India. Right? So therefore, first reason that becomes is lack of one strong center becomes the number one reason. And you can give the example of 1686, that when there was a strong center, then East India Company that is East India Company lost. It was thrashed, right? It had no chance at all, right? So therefore, when there was a strong center, the company was not able to do anything, right? Second aspect that comes into operation is companies, they do not have strong militaries. Companies are created to do business, right? In those times, since international law of the seas, UNCLOS is not there, UN Convention on Laws of the Seas is not there. So while you travel in the oceans, you can be attacked by the Portuguese, you can be attacked by the Spanish, by the French, by the Dutch. So fine, the Royal Charter gave you right to carry guns and right to wage war and right to sign treaties, right? This kind of scenario it was there. But otherwise, primary focus of any company, right? This is a beautiful definition. As for me, this is the most important sentences which really help us, which I'm going to say right now, right? So listen carefully. It's a lot of things are about organization, right? Not just the public administration optional is about some kind of organizations, but another optional management is also about another kind of organizations. So state is an organization which has a job, and the job is to rule a territory and the people on it. That is why the states either have territory motive, right? For example, the state of China wants to capture more and more territory. State is such an organization which is hungry for territory, right? Or the state has people motive, welfare state, garibi hatao, right? So people motive and territory motive, these are the two motives of such organizations which call themselves state. There's another kind of organization called private sector companies. Private sector or private companies are such organizations whose core motive is profit motive. Whose profit? Of shareholders. Whose profit? Of shareholders. NGOs are such organization whose core motive is social motive, that is social welfare. They are not for profit organizations. Political parties are such organizations whose core motive is political power motive, and for that they fight elections, right? So they will do everything ultimately to win the elections, right? So therefore this definition becomes very, very important. Anyways, so company is a company. Why it should have a big army? Because that is going to lead to what you call as wastage of resources, right? So the shareholders will not accept that the company should be allowed to have huge amount of army, right? So it was actually initially the royal military. Initially it was royal military, right? Royal military was present in 1757. Therefore, Conquest began by the East India Company because of assistance of Royal Military. Royal Military was present in India at that point of time. Why? Because Third Carnatic War was going on, and Third Carnatic War was a result of 7-year global war. That is, the British and the French were fighting against each other, not just in India but in the whole world. And it was not just companies fighting against each other, it was the British state and French state also fighting against each other. So therefore, to assist the English East India Company, the Royal Military came, and to assist the French East India Company, the Royal Military of France came. Right? So therefore, when Mir Jafar offered Robert Clive that if you'll remove Siraj-ud-Dowla, I'll help you, Robert Clive got confidence to accept the offer because Royal Military was present with him. Otherwise, EIC army was just 200 to 500 men. That's it. 200 to 500 men, right? So therefore, second aspect is that conquest began. One of the reason that conquest was possible was the assistance of, and conquest survived because of Royal Military in 1857. British rule was overthrown, that is, company rule was overthrown. In October 1857, Royal Military arrived from Britain, which actually changed the situation decisively in favor of the Britishers. Right? So therefore, Royal Military helped them in beginning the conquest, and Royal Military helped them in preventing overthrow of the conquest. Right? So that becomes the second reason how the East India Company was, they got outside army support. Third component that comes into operation is they were able to build a large army from India's money, right? And how did they get this money? For example, through Plassey plunder, plus through land revenue of Bengal, they built a very, very large army. And third point, you can also mention that when they signed the subordinate alliance, then they are basically getting an additional army. Right? So army is, the Indian state's army was disbanded, and now EIC will maintain army in that Indian state which has signed the subordinate alliance. But this army will be paid for by who? This army will be paid for by the Indian state. That means free ka army. So subordinate alliance, it led to free army, that is free of cost. Because who is paying for this army? The Indian state. Right? So therefore, as a result, from 1798 onwards, when subordinate alliances were signed, then by using Indians' money, the company was able to build a very, very large military. Right? So therefore, this assisted the company in developing a very, very strong military. Then fourth point that comes into operation is divide and rule policy, or the diplomacy of the East India Company. Divide and rule policy or the diplomacy of the East India Company. So here, for example, you can talk about that how they use the succession disputes. For example, there were succession disputes. So therefore, succession dispute means an Indian ruling family is divided from each other. I'll give one example. In 1802, the Gaikwad, right, two factions were there. The Gaikwad signed the subordinate alliance. Why? Because East India Company, you are militarily strong, please help me and I will in return do something for you. East India Company said, if you sign subordinate alliance, then I'll make your branch of the family the ruler. That person accepted. East India Company interfered, and therefore Gaikwad of Baroda, who is a Maratha Sardar, so therefore he was subordinated in the June 1802. Right? So succession dispute resulted in this kind of scenario. So succession disputes, they resulted in subordinate alliances, right? And therefore that resulted in free army. And obviously because it is alliance, that means this Indian state cannot enter into any kind of alliance with other Indian powers, because in the subordinate alliance, foreign policy of the Indian state was also taken over. That means you cannot externally sign any treaty with other Indian rulers. You also cannot sign any treaty with French or with Dutch or with anyone, right? So therefore this is how, anyways, so succession disputes, they resulted in subordinate alliance. You can give certain examples. Example, the Gaikwad of Baroda. in 1802. Another example is of, for example, Peshwa in 1802. So Holkar of Indore, he wanted to take revenge of killing of his brother by the Peshwa. Therefore, he attacked Peshwa in 1802, removed Peshwa from power. Removed Peshwa from power. And after that, Peshwa Bajirao too went to the Britishers, signed subordinate alliance, and then signed subordinate alliance, and therefore it is a succession dispute which is resulting in establishment of this, right? So therefore, this is what is, you can give these two examples that why succession disputes. Second aspect is that, for example, in the case of, for example, the rivalries between the Indian states, rivalries between states, right? So here you can mention that why Hyderabad signed subordinate alliance in 1798, because there was fear of neighbors or fear of Marathas and Mysore, right? So therefore, because the Indian states were not united, so therefore East India Company used it as an opportunity to add an alliance ally to it, plus this person will not be able to set up any alliance with any other party, and East India Company will be able to get a free ka money, free ka army, right? So that will be there. Another aspect, it can be, for example, अच्छा इसमें अवध can also come. Awadh 1801, right? So in the case of Awadh, Uncle Sadat Ali Khan too told East India Company, I will give you 76 lakh rupees as subsidy if you'll remove my nephew Wazir Ali. East India Company did that. By 1801, this is happening in 1798. Within 3 years, Nawab is not able to pay 76 lakh rupees as subsidy. So therefore the Britishers, they now force a formal subordinate alliance on Awadh, and there they take over half of Awadh, right? So therefore, had Uncle not promised 76 lakh rupees as subsidy to himself become the Nawab of Awadh, then this 1801 subordinate alliance would also not have taken place, right? Anyways, I'm just giving you the background. I'm not just telling you what you have to write in the answer, right? I'm also telling you slightly background part of it, right? So this is there. Apart from this, for example, certain opportunities were created. If you take the case of Travancore, so in the case of Travancore, the Naya troops, they revolted, and therefore the Travancore went to its friend, the British East India Company, and the British East India Company friend said that if you'll sign subordinate alliance with me, then I'll crush that revolt by the Naya troops, right? So therefore, law and order was the issue here, that is revolt by Naya troops, revolt by Naya troops, and therefore signed subordinate alliance to get EIC help. So this is how they are using the internal disputes which are there. Another aspect that you can mention is that they signed alliances with the Indian powers, therefore never fought Indian rulers collectively. Never fought Indian rulers collectively. So here certain examples are there. For example, their policy of ring fence, that is signing military alliances with the neighbors so that they come to your help if someone attacks you. So as part of policy of ring fence, in 1782, they signed an alliance with Marathas, that is Treaty of Salbai. In 1809, for example, they signed a military alliance with the Sikh, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, Treaty of Amritsar, right? So therefore, this is how, if you are my friend, then obviously you will not be fighting against me by ganging up with the rest of the Indian rulers. So therefore, this is how they neutralized the Indian powers. Whenever they are signing subordinate alliance, so subordinate alliance resulted in loss of foreign policy, and therefore again they are neutralizing the Indian powers, that is the Indian rulers who have signed subordinate alliance. They do not have the power nor they do have the military to get into an alliance against the British, right? So therefore that is what is happening, policy of ring fence and subordinate alliance, right? You can give certain examples. Example, they use divide and rule. It was with the help of, so you can, it was with help of Hyderabad and Marathas that East India Company defeated Mysore finally in 1799. Then defeated Marathas in Second Anglo-Maratha War of 1833-05. Right? See, until 1799 you were great friends, right? You're fighting together, and in 1798 they take care of Hyderabad, they subordinate Hyderabad, then they take care of Mysore, then they take care of Marathas. So they never fought the Indian powers collectively, they always played their policy of divide and rule, right? Hanji. If the Marathas had been able to establish, if Marathas had been able to win in the third battle of Panipat 1761, then the first point, that is a strong center, would have been present in India, and therefore the empire building would not have taken place. Because Mahji Sindhia was a strong ruler, but Mahji Sindhia was only one of the Maratha Sardars. There were other Maratha Sardars also, and properly he was not one central ruler over whole of what you call as Maratha Empire, right? Because of equal powers, right? So another aspect that you can mention is, another example of their divide and rule was, for example, they always ensured that they never keep the same people. They do not want sepoys of a particular state to be present in the army of that state, right? So whenever they'll sign subordinate alliance, so for example, they'll play divide and rule. Example, they divided the Indian ruler from sepoys. Example, Bengal army is not going to have Bengalis. Bengal army will have those who are from Awadh, right? So Bengal army will have Awadhis. Awadhis will be, okay, Bengalis would be present in maybe in Madras army, right? Why so? So that if the Nawab of Bengal goes to the sepoys and says "Khela hobe," right, and then the Awadhi soldiers will ho bina, right? That is, they do not have any affinity towards, right? So therefore this is how they used to ensure that a revolt cannot take place by a subordinated Indian ruler also. Lastly, you can mention that better organization plus better technology. Technology may, you can give examples of, let's say, grape shot. Grape shot is like shotgun. When you fire, there's like 10 bullets or 12 bullets, so at short range they are very very helpful. Then brown bess musket, that was a very good rifle. Why it was a very good rifle? Because it had what you call as, in the front a knife was there, right? So in the short range it can act as a sword, and in the long range it can act as a gun, right? Similarly, they continuously improved, for example, the Enfield rifle, which also contributed to the 1857 revolt. But otherwise it also tells us that the Britishers, they were continuously bringing new weapons, right? So therefore, better technology. File firing is another form of organization. File means you stand as a group and you continuously fire at a particular target, so the enemy feels as if a barish is taking place, right? So therefore these are the reasons, right, because of which they are able to win, right? So that's how it is. The first two questions I deliberately kind of took slightly more time. The focus was to gradually get us into rhythm. अब next वाले questions थोड़ा सा timely complete करने के लिए next वाले questions we'll do in relatively more better time. थोड़ा बह जाता हूँ मैं भावनाओं में. हाँ. In conclusion, you can write down the topics of the paragraphs. In conclusion, you can write down that initially it was the support of the royal military. Initially, it was the support of the royal military that began the conquest by the company, and later it was with Indians. It was Indian money that the company expanded its own army, right? Expanded its own army, and further it deployed the divide and rule policy and prevented an alliance between the Indian powers. And these factors ultimately contributed to. Ultimate conclusion is, you can use a sentence of the question also. Therefore, because of diplomacy and divide and rule of the company, the multiple Indian armies were present, but they were never able to come together, and they were defeated one by one by the Britishers. Because question said that sentence only, right? That despite multiple Indian armies, how the company was able to establish why did the armies of British East India Company win consistently against the more numerous and better equipped armies of the Indian rulers? So conclusion can be yes, they were indeed more numerous, that is much greater in size, right? But not able to come together as one single unit. And the British East India Company's army defeated us one by one, right? So therefore that is what is there. ठीक है, अभी next वाला question फिर break के बाद लेते हैं. ठीक है, next question is going to be about this, that is the peasant revolts, right? How did the colonial rule affect the tribals in India, and what was the tribal response to the colonial oppression?
Looking for an effective plan to begin your essay mains preparation? Adopt the structured approach of pre-decided themes and develop sharp essay writing skills. Break down complex topics to articulate your thoughts with logic and clarity. Enroll in the Vision IS Essay Enrichment Program starting from 27th June, 1 p.m. Build your essay writing skills into your biggest strength.
So welcome back. The next question is, how did the colonial rule affect the tribals? So basically here we are going to focus upon what was the impact of the British rule on the tribals, right? And second aspect is that what was the tribal response to the colonial oppression. That is, we are going to, so the question can be divided into two parts. One element is going to be about the impact of the colonial rule. Second is the response, that is the peasant revolts which are there. So therefore the question is simple. In the first component, broadly what you can, if I draw a pictorial approach which I use in the class, that is one option, or you want to go with paragraph approach. Pictorial approach, right? So if I look at, these are the people of the plains and these are the tribal areas or the forests, right? So what was the primary purpose of the Britishers? It was to take money from the people, right? And when the Britishers are able to establish their state, that is, they are able to establish an organization which is ruling the territory and the people. So therefore the state earns money through taxes. So therefore, in the traditional times, the kings of the plains, they left the tribals to themselves. They did not interfere too much in their life, even with respect to land revenue or other kind of taxes. Now, tribals for their livelihood are of three kinds. A, they are peasants. That is, they do agriculture in the forest areas. Second, they are hunters. And third, they are gatherers. What do they gather? The forest produce, which in the schemes you call minor forest produce. For example, there are schemes MSP for MFP or Pradhan Mantri Van Dhan Yojana, Van Dhan, wealth of the forest. That is forest produce like bamboo, sal, right, and other products which are there like traditional medicines, right. Traditionally, for additional income, basically for the barter trade, there used to be some interaction between tribals and the people of the plains, and the tribals, they used to have some form of additional income with the help of this, right. So when the Britishers, they implemented their land revenue system. So in some of the cases, the first system that the Britishers applied was a farming system. Why farming system? Because they had this ideology of Orientalism. That is, initially until 1813, the Britishers, they wanted to rule India the India way, right? And whenever there was shortfall of revenue, the India way of increasing revenue was bring ijardars. Ijardars who participated in the auctions, and they got the right to collect revenue from a particular area. It was temporarily applied, that is for 1 season or for 2 seasons. After that, the ijardars will go back to being moneylender or to being merchant, because they were the ones who used to participate in the auctions. And the zamindars, as tax collectors, they will come back, because traditionally zamindar used to collect land revenue. So in some of the cases, they auctioned the right to collect revenue to the revenue farmers of the plains, and therefore the tribals will feel that the outsiders have entered into our territory, and now they are acting as chaudhries, that we are here to collect land revenue from you. They will have police protection also. In some of the cases, the zamindar of the plains was made owner of the land, of the forest. So now zamindar with his lathials, etc., he can torment the ryots, that is the peasants, tribals, to give land revenue. In other cases, they made the tribal leader as the owner of land. That is, from tomorrow, you are owner of the land. The tribals who are working under you, they are your tenants, and you have to pay this much amount of land revenue to me. In some of the cases, they made the tribal the owner of the land. That means application of Ryotwari kind of system, right? And therefore you have to pay the land revenue, because land revenue is always paid by the owner. Rent is always paid by the tenant, right? So this is what was being done. So therefore, when they implemented their land revenue system, there was influx of the outsiders. Apart from that, because the land revenue was very, very high, and because the Britishers insisted on cash payment of the land revenue, right, instead of payment in terms of kgs of wheat or rice or other products. So therefore, they brought in the moneylender. They brought in the moneylender. And now moneylender is going to oppress the ryots of the forest areas like he used to oppress the ryots of the plains. And there will be ultimately loss of land, either because of high land revenue or because the land here is being mortgaged to the moneylender. Right, so therefore suddenly now in the economic space, the people of the plains are becoming the dominant force, right, in the life of the tribals. Then the wealth of the forest. So Indian merchants and British businesses, they are interested in trading the wealth of the forest. Contracts will be given out to cut trees, right, wood which is used in railways, wood which is used in shipping sector for making of ships. So that was the wealth of the forest. And therefore the influx after 1813, monopoly of the East India Company was ended, and therefore non-East India Company businesses, they can enter into India, and those kind of businessmen, they will be basically taking these contracts. In fact, they will be making the tribals do forced labor also, right? So their dignity is also going to go away, right? So British businesses, they will start entering, mining companies will start entering, right? Timber contractors, they will start entering, right? So therefore this is how their economy was destroyed by the outsiders. Their political autonomy was also not respected, because in the traditional times the tribals used to follow tribal law, but now the tribal law will not be followed. The authority of the tribal leader will not be there. You, right, that is the district collector, he will say that me and my rule of law, we are the boss now, and tribal leader, you are in jail now, right, if you do not follow my orders, right? So therefore they implemented their laws, right? British laws were brought, and these laws were, for example, IPC, CPC, Civil Procedure Code 1859, IPC 1860, CRPC 1861, right, plus Indian Forests Act 1878. Indian Forest Act 1878 classified the forests into reserved forests, into protected forests, into open to all. In the reserved forest, the tribals were not, in the reserved forest, the tribals were not allowed. That means they lost their home. Tribals get out. In the name of conservation of the forest, you cannot live in your home anymore. In the protected forests, the tribals, they could not collect forest produce. They can collect forest produce, but for only their personal consumption. They cannot sell the forest produce. They are called protected forest, where you can't sell MFP. MFP I'm using for forest produce. Where it is minor forest produce. Major forest produce is timber, right? So therefore, this is how the British laws, they hurt their way of life. They banned hunting, and therefore, for example, chain chews in Hyderabad area, they nearly went extinct because they only knew to earn their livelihood. They only knew to have food through hunting, and now hunting is banned. So they just cannot. It is not their way of life. They cannot get converted into peasant overnight, right? They banned jhum cultivation. Why did they ban jhum cultivation? Because they wanted settled peasant communities who pay land revenue regularly. In slash and burn cultivation, you cultivate a plot. By the time the district collector will send his officers to collect land revenue from you, you have gone to another place where to search for you, right? So therefore, the Britishers wanted you to stay at one place. That is why they banned jhum cultivation, right? Environment protection, etc. They are just random things for them. Plus, Christian missionaries, they did cultural interference. That means their religion. Therefore, you can conclude, you can convert this flowchart into paragraphs, right? Like 3 paragraphs you can convert, and you can conclude that therefore the way of life was turned upside down, right? Their political autonomy was taken over. Their economy was dominated by the outsiders. Their culture was interfered with, and their dignity was also not respected when they were made to do forced labor on these railways projects, right? These British businesses are railways, for example, building of railways, building of roadways, mining companies, timber contractors, right? So therefore, on all of these projects, the tribals are made to do forced labor. So therefore, their dignity is also not there, right? You can use some additional information. For example, there was this what you call as Criminal Tribes Act of 1871, whereby certain tribes were marked as criminal by birth, right? So therefore, this was the situation which is there, right? So that is the impact, right? The life is turned upside down. Okay. Then when you look at the response of the tribals, so response of the tribals, so you can say that the tribals were not organized. There was a lack of modern politics, and not properly united or properly organized. Therefore, different kind of response were there. Primarily, violence was used as a response, right? And this violence was used as a response in pre-1850 sand revolts. In the pre-1850 sand revolts, they rose, and the important ones you can mention, for example, coal uprising you can mention. Then you can mention the what you call as the Santhal uprising, which was for their homeland, Dominico. Similarly, in 1899, there was Munda Ulugulan, right? So therefore, these are the some of the peasant revolts you can mention, that this was for homeland. This was for homeland, right? This was one of the reasons. Santhals, Mundas, they revolted on 25th of December 1899. So therefore, here you can give an example of cultural interference. Similarly, then second point you can mention that there was non-violent response also. Example, in Andhra, Alluri Sitaramaraju, he participated in the non-cooperation movement. Alluri Sitaramaraju participated in non-cooperation movement of 1920. So therefore, here you can mention that, however, as modern Indian national movement progressed, it had an impact on tribals also, and tribals of Andhra participated in Gandhian Satyagraha under Alluri Sitaramaraju, right? And third point, here you can mention, okay, so therefore, violent, non-violent, right? Alluri Sitaramaraju, later on, when Gandhiji withdrew the non-cooperation movement, so he also, then again, he began a violent revolt, and he became a martyr in 1924, but otherwise, violent, non-violent. And then in the conclusion part, you can mention that there was setting up of, in 1935, there was setting up of this All India Tribal League, that is an all India organization of the tribals was set up. And later, via 5th and 6th schedule, and other acts and schemes. In post-independence era, the constitution makers and the Indian state has taken multiple steps to safeguard, to undo the grievances of the past of the British era. Right. So therefore, this is how you can. This is another example of giving a conclusion, whereby you talk about the future. Right. So in one line, you give the conclusion by talking about the future. Right. Like a happy ending kind of scenario. Right. So therefore, that is what is there. So this is how you can talk about these things. Then next question that can come into operation is the 1857 revolt. Next question is 1857 revolt was culmination of recurrent big and small rebellions. 1857 uprising was the culmination of recurrent big and small local rebellions. So that had occurred in the preceding 100 years of the British rule elucidate. So if I try to talk about, let's say, breaking up this particular question into couple of 2-3 parts. So first of all is how we should attempt such a now this is a question where slightly complex English has come into place. So how we should approach, always try to break it into simpler parts, right? So 1857 uprising, okay, this is my topic, was culmination of, that means the focus is on reason of 1857 revolt. It was culmination of, kya iska reason, culmination of recurrent big and small local rebellions. Recurrent means happening again and again. Big and small, fine. Local means not all India level. Local rebellions that had occurred in the preceding 100 years of the British rule. That means from 1757 to 1857, multiple, not all India level, local revolts, they took place. And in 1857 revolt was culmination of them, right? So usually see UPSC is acting in a very interesting manner. Usually the traditional books, they do not talk about the reason of the 1857 revolt, like connected with the peasant revolts of the first 100 years. So the whole idea, think of it like this, that ultimately what happened is that step number 1, the British rule came. The Britishers, they started exploiting us, right, to a beyond threshold level. That was kind of new to us. So therefore we did not know, modern means of communications were not there with us. So therefore the tribals, they did not know how to act in a united manner, right? So therefore imagine that this is a territory of India and one bomb goes off here, doop, right? Then another bomb goes off here, doop. Then another bomb goes off here, doop, 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 doop. This is what is happening in the first 100 years of the British rule, right? But they are not connected with each other, right? So there are many small and big rebellions, and Britishers are able to defeat all of them one by one, one by one, one by one. They are able to defeat all of them, right? So therefore, then we thought that divided we have failed. Maybe if we come together, right? These are peasant revolts and tribal uprisings which are doing it. Divided we have failed. Maybe if we fight the Britishers collectively, maybe then we'll be successful. And therefore we came together and we fought the British in 1857 revolt. Right? So therefore it's like a culmination. 1857 revolt is culmination. And what is the bridge? The bridge is because we failed when we were divided. Therefore, we revolted together. Different regions of India came together in the 1857 revolt in the hope that we'll be successful. Right? So therefore, always remember this statement. In fact, write it down, and on this basis, how to analyze the previous year questions. Analogy is a very, very important aspect. Right? So, and you can guess future year questions also. Let us create a question which can very easily be a future year question. Right? And the question is that every failure in anti-British struggle, led to stronger struggle led to stronger struggle, ultimately leading to independence. So therefore, we get to know about the spirit of the people of India, that they did not give up. And every failure in the anti-British struggle is leading to a stronger anti-British struggle, right? I'm using the word anti-British struggle. I can use the word INM also, Indian National Movement. But Indian National Movement, modern politics, it began after 1857, right? But by using anti-British struggle, I can include the pre-1857 era also, right? So therefore, divided, we failed. So therefore, in 1857, we came together, but sadly again we failed. So then we thought ki, okay, not violence but non-violent method should be used, right? So therefore modern Indian national movement begun by the moderates. When the moderates failed, then in 1905 extremists arrived. When extremists failed by 1908, Bengal revolutionaries arrived. Prafulla Chaki, Khudiram Bose, magistrate Kingsford targeted, right? Some innocent women, British women getting killed, right? Barra dacoity, Zamidar of Barra was looted, right? This kind of, right? Barra dacoity. Anyways, right? So therefore, that is what is happening. When revolutionaries failed, then what is happening? Moderates have failed, extremists have failed. Now revolutionaries have also failed. So phata poster nikla hero Mahatma Gandhi, right? Nuclear power, nuclear weapon, right? Mahatma Gandhi. When Gandhiji seemed to fail, then left wing became strong. Netaji's, then INA came, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose came, right? So every failure in the anti-British struggle, we are not giving up. Every failure in the anti-British struggle is leading to better struggle, right? So therefore, that is the overall idea of this particular question. And how to prove this particular question? To prove this question, what we are going to do is that we can think about like this, that 1857 revolt was culmination. So the question is not about 1857 revolt. The question is about pre-1857 revolts, right? That is the primary focus which is there, right? So broadly in this particular scenario, what you're going to, you can, in the introduction part, you can rephrase the question itself, right? And you can basically write down that in the intro part, you can write down right? So there was commonality in grievances, methods, leadership aspects of pre-1857 revolts and 1857 revolt. Therefore, when we failed in first 100 years, we got united in 1857 revolt with hope of overthrowing the British oppression, right? So therefore, this can be a introduction aspect of it. Now, if I look about the body aspect of the problem, so therefore, if I look at the grievances, then in the grievances part, what are the grievances of the 1857 revolt, or what are the grievances of the pre-1857 revolt? In the pre-1857 revolt, grievances of the riots is what? Basically the oppression which is created by the LR system. Land revenue systems, they have basically resulted in what? Land revenue system, they have resulted in, core aspect is landlessness. Oppression by moneylenders. Oppression by moneylenders. Third aspect is lack of occupancy rights, which is actually part of landlessness only. Anyways, lack of occupancy rights. No respect to the patta system. That is, high amount of land revenue is taken away from them. Continuation of illegal avabs. Continuation of the illegal avabs. That is the grievances of the pre-1857 revolt. If you combined the permanent settlement, so here you can write down that in the permanent, there were revolts in the pre-1857 revolts in Bengal, right? So for example, so here you can further add that in the, you can give certain examples of revolts in Bengal. For example, Sannyasi rebellion, right? Uprising movement, which is taking place in 1830s. So there, what is the grievance? The grievance, you can begin with Rangpur rebellion, right? Rangpur rebellion took place in 1780s, where the grievance was against, in the Rangpur rebellion, the grievance was against revenue farmers, operation by the revenue farmers, right? That is highland revenue. Then in the Uprising revolt, the grievance was against the indigo planters, plus against zamidars, that is high rents, illegal avabs, bedakli, that is lack of occupancy rights, right? Similarly, you can, okay, so that is what is there. Similarly, you can mention that in what you call as Bangalore sab yaar ho gaya. Then you can mention that in Madras there was revolts by polygars with the help of the ryots, and the grievance was high land revenue, right? These aspects. So therefore, is tarike se you can use the revolts which have happened, and basically you are classifying this, and you are basically giving examples of this. And in the 1857 revolt, what was the grievance? 1857 revolt took place in central India, where Malwari settlement was there. Malwari settlement was a hybrid. Hybrid means in most of the cases, Ryot was the owner of the land. In some of the cases, the Zamidar was the owner of land, right? And therefore, all of these grievances, they are present in the 1857 revolt also, right? So therefore, you try to draw some kind of commonality. Then second aspect, you talk about, for example, grievances of the elites. Right? अभी elites क्या? अभी grievances of the, ये grievances of Ryot हो गया, ठीक है? These are the grievances of the Ryot. Then if you talk about grievances of the artisans, right? So there you can mention example in the Sannyasi rebellion. In the Sannyasi rebellion, the livelihood of artisans and small traders, livelihood of small traders, right, was hurt, plus also of artisans. Well, this formed one of the grievances of the Sannyasi rebellion, right? And in the 1857 revolt, this grievance was also present. So reason is same. Then third aspect, if you talk about, let's say, the elites. Elites, they can be divided into, for example, the kings, right? So for example, Wazir Ali, who was Nawab of Bengal from 1797 to 1908, Nawab of Awadh. So when his uncle, Sadat Ali Khan II, promised 76 lakh rupees as subsidy, after that what he did, when his uncle was made the Nawab, he revolted with the, he provided leadership to the Ryots, right? Similarly, we see in 1857 revolt, when Jhansi ki Rani, right, when Bahadur Shah Zafar, when they are feeling that their status is heard, they are the ones who are providing leadership to the revolt, right? So there was commonality in leadership and commonality in grievances. Second aspect can be nobility. So there is a revolt by Diwan Velu Thampi in Travancore in 1809. He revolted in 1809. Why? Because of policy of indirect rule of the British resident. That is, the Britishers, they signed subordinate alliance in 1805, promised that will not interfere in the internal affairs, but still interfered. So therefore, they are hurting the status of Diwan Velu Thampi, who is like the Prime Minister of Travancore, right? And therefore, he provided leadership to the Ryots. In this particular case, and who participated here? Here the Nair troops also participated. and riots also participated. In the 1857 revolt, the leadership, for example, was provided by such elites. For example, Khan Bahadur Khan, right? They are nobility, they are nobles. Similarly, for example, Peshwa, adopted son of Peshwa, Nana Sahib, he is providing leadership. So therefore, here also leadership it is provided by them. Tatya Tope, Nana Sahib, Tatya Tope, Nana Sahib, Tatya Tope, right? Then Begum Hazrat Mahal, right? So therefore, these kind of people who are not directly the kings, but they are associated closely with the king, they are providing leadership, right? And in 1857 revolts, the troops also, the sepoys also participated. Third point, for example, in the case of this thing, in the pre-1857 revolts, in some of the so traditional elites they participated. Then there was this revolt, for example, in this Raja Chet Singh of Banaras. Raja Chet Singh of Banaras, right? So his lands were, so think of him like a very big zamindar who has the status of Raja also, right? His lands were auctioned. His lands were auctioned. Why? Because he could not pay the land revenue. And in 1857 revolt, you notice that a zamindar called Kunwar Singh of Jagdishpur, Bihar, he was also a zamindar. So we notice that in pre-1857 era, leadership was provided by the kings, by the nobles, by the zamindars, and in 1857 revolt also leadership was provided by the kings, by the nobles and the zamindars, right? So therefore there is commonality in the leadership which was provided pre-1857 also and in 1857 revolt also, right? So there is commonality in leadership which is there, right? Commonality in grievance which is there, right? You can also mention, for example, you can take apart from the zamindars, plus you can take the example of polygars. So polygars, they revolted, right? In the Mysore area, in the Carnatic area, polygars revolted. Why? Because their lands were auctioned, right? And here, what was the grievances? So polygars, they lost lands because of Ryotwari settlement in Madras. Because of Ryotwari in Madras, and therefore they had revolted. Therefore they revolted. There is a revolt, right? Any source you will see, there is a revolt by the polygars. And in this particular case, what was a grievance of the zamindars? In Mehalwari also, many intermediary zamindars in Mehalwari, many intermediary zamindars lost their estates. That is, talukdars lost their estates, and therefore they also provided leadership in the revolt, right? For example, Kunwar Singh of Jagdishpur, he had lost his estates, right? So therefore we see a commonality is there with respect to who is providing leadership also, right? Then commonality of another grievance, right? For example, we have seen that how because of spread of Christianity, etc., that there was a fear of religion under threat. Fear of religion under threat, and that is why many of the religious sects are also revolting. For example, in the case of Sannyasi rebellion, which took place from 1750 to 1850, their religious freedom was hurt when when their visit to holy places was not allowed. Right? Then there was this one revolt where there was a tax on beard, revolt by Titu Mir, right? There was a tax on beard, this kind of scenario, right? Plus in general there was a grievance, right? And in this side also religion was a grievance, that is religion under threat because of the grease in the Enfield rifle, that it is made of cow fat and pig fat, right? The grievance against social reforms, right? So therefore that also acted as a tool. So therefore that is the commonality of the religious grievance which is there. You can also mention here Munda to khair chalo 1899 mein hua hai, but yes, in general you can mention that influx of Christian missionaries etc. also created this fear which was there. Then there is commonality in method, that is method was violent revolt, right? So therefore the reasons, the methods, the leadership is the same in the pre-1857 and in the 1857 revolt. How can you conclude this? Now, because something is conclusion, right? Conclusion means if you are watching a movie, so therefore anger is getting developed, right? So villain is doing his thing, so therefore at some particular place, some people, they rise, they are defeated. In another place, some incident happens, and then you reach a climax where, you know, finally the villain is going to be defeated by the big hero, right? So therefore something should be better in this particular scenario. So there in the conclusion you can mention the differences. Some difference you can mention. Example, this time slightly better organization was there, slightly better unity was there, right? This time the British army had also revolted, that is the British Indian army had revolted. So this was a new thing which had not taken place. So in the pre-1857, Britishers, they used to use their armies to repress the revolt. This time the army itself has revolted, right? So therefore, hence it was a culmination and an improvement over the pre-1857 revolt. That can be your conclusion, right? So therefore, this is how the question it can be tackled. The next question that we have is socio-religious reforms. Can you change? Right. Next question that we have is socio-religious reforms. And what is the socio-religious reforms? यहाँ पे ये वाला, हाँ, ठीक है. Trace the rise and growth of socio-religious reform movements. Trace the rise of socio-religious reform movements with special reference to Young Bengal and Brahmo Samaj, right? So see, Young Bengal took place in 1830s, early 1830s, Brahmo Samaj 1828, and social reforms. Why Raja Ram Mohan Roy is called father of modern India? Because he was the initiator of social reforms. Sati Abolition Act 1829. And question also says rise. That means our answer should have more bias in the initial phase aspect, and maybe in the conclusion aspect or somewhere in the middle, right? Last two paragraphs, a conclusion paragraph and another paragraph, we can talk about, let's say, the growth aspect, that is after that what happened, right? So trace the rise and growth, right? So we have to trace the events which are rise and growth of social religious reform movements with special reference to Young Bengal and Brahmo Samaj. Okay. So in the introduction part, you can mention educated Italian Prime Minister in Calcutta for pre-polls. Like imagine that Italian Prime Minister has come to Calcutta for campaigning, right? That kind of scenario. See? This is basically a mnemonic, right? That is in the introduction, you can mention that the major social issues picked up by reformers included dash वेस्टर्न एजुकेशन. मैं यहाँ प्लस लिख रहा हूँ, अब वहाँ कॉमा लिखेंगे. आई से आइडलेटरी, पी प्रीस्टक्राफ्ट, एम चाइल्ड मैरिज एंड विडो मैरिज, child marriage and widow remarriage, in infanticide, especially female infanticide, Calcutta C casteism, PP polygamy, polytheism. So otherwise, though, usually we will forget 3 or 4 of these social issues, but if we have some mnemonic in our mind, right, then we can remember this, right? So therefore, educated, Western education, Italian ka I, that is idolatry, P say priestcraft, M say marriage, 2 issues, child marriage and widow remarriage, in infanticide, female infanticide, Calcutta C casteism, this 4 is just a filler, P polygamy, polytheism, right? So therefore, this is another way of use the syllabus to craft an introduction or conclusion, right? And the answer checker will feel कि मस्त है यार, इस सारे points ही mention कर दिए, है ना? So therefore, this is another way of writing an introduction. There are multiple ways of writing introduction, right? Either talk about the past, or talk about the some kind of syllabus thing, right? Or talk about the essence of the question. There can be multiple ways. There is no one fixed way, right? So therefore, but you should be proficient in every way, and you can have predefined, for example, your introductions to different kind of questions of the PYQs. That okay, here I am going to use this introduction, there I am going to use this. So therefore, so that at least you have a data set with you, what I can use, right? So therefore, this is how it can be introduction. So, and then you can write down, However, initially, issues of caste and women were considered sensitive. However, initially, the issues of caste and women were not picked as they were considered sensitive. Right? Second paragraph you can write down, primary role in beginning or primary initial role was played by Young Bengal of Henry Vivian Derozio and Brahmo Samaj of Roy, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, RRR, of Raja Ram Mohan Roy, right? And then you can create one paragraph for, let's say, Young Bengal. You can create another paragraph for Brahmo Samaj, and then in the conclusion point you can mention, you can complete this story in the conclusion that however later reformers like Keshav Chandra Sen, Swami Dayanand Saraswati, Swami Vivekananda, Pratha Samaj very strongly highlighted the issues of caste and women, laying the foundation for future reforms, which continued even in the Gandhian era, where Mahatma Gandhi picked up the issue of anti-untouchability. ठीक है, तो social reforms बिल्कुल वहां तक चले गए, ठीक. So that's how you can write down a conclusion which is for the future, right? So if you talk about, for example, Young Bengal, so what is the idea of Young Bengal? Who was Young Bengal? So there was a teacher, I'm just 10% of him. His name was Henry Vivian Derozio, but there is a commonality. I also ask students to always focus on why, right? Never do any kind of rote learning. He also used to focus on why. That means what was the tool of Young Bengal? The tool of Young Bengal was logic or reason, which you also call as rationality. There were 2 tools which were used in the social reforms by the social reformers. One was religion, that is scriptures, and second was logic, right? Now Young Bengal used only reason, only logic. That is, it will not say that see हमारे शास्त्र भी तो ऐसा नहीं कहते, तुम ऐसा क्यों कर रहे हो? They will not be saying that see our shastras, they say something else, why are you doing so? The only tool was logic, reason, rationality, right? You can write about them. Who were they? So their introduction, so therefore Henry Vivian Derozio, professor of Hindu college, he and his students, they were called Young Bengal, right? What was their method? Right? So their method was they questioned everything, right? That is, with the help of the doctrine of logic, they tried to question all the social practices. They questioned all the social practices, right? They had great faith in sciences. They had great faith in logic and sciences. Set up a society for acquisition of GK, general knowledge, right? So therefore they promoted Western education, therefore promoted scientific temperament, therefore promoted scientific temperament, or try to promote scientific temperament, right? Wanted, for example, promoted scientific temperament, however, right, failed. Why? Because society was deeply religious. Society is religious, whereas your method is not using religion. So you are saying that you are doing child marriage. This is illogical. The child is not psychologically ready to be starting a family. The child is not biologically ready to start a family. You're hurting her career. You're ending her career prospects nearly by getting her married at such an early age. This is illogical. This is irrational. This is irreasonable. The other person is like, khana kha liya? Jo. Right? In our samaj, as per our religion, we have to follow Garbdhan ceremony, whereby the child is to be married before puberty and she goes to husband's house post puberty. That is our वे ऑफ लाइफ. हम अधर्म हमसे पाप मत कराओ, निकल जाओ, तुम्हारे पिताजी की बहुत इज्जत करते हैं इसलिए तुम शहर हैं, राइट? स्टिल रिस्पेक्ट योर फादर, दैट्स व्हाई टॉलरेटिंग यू, गेट अप, राइट? दिस काइंड ऑफ सिनेरियो विल बी देयर, right? So therefore in a society which is deeply religious, there you are totally focused purely on logic without any basis in religion. People, they want to follow their religion, and many of the social practices are product of religion, right? Religion acted as a very very positive force, right? बुराई करना बहुत आसान है, but the simple point is, when no constitution was there, when no law was there, what used to provide order to the society, right? It was that what is right and what is wrong, right? So therefore in ethics you study that how religion acts as a very very important source of ethics also and morals also, right? That is what you study in ethics, right? So therefore how it failed, because society was deeply religious, and these people, and they used only logic. In fact, you can mention this point also, they were supporters of atheism, matlab, right? So therefore they became popular because of their radical ideas, right? For example, you say that we are following our God, we'll be going, they're like, I want to talk to your God, I'll follow only those things which are logical. Your God says so, I want to have a debate with him or her, right? That is so much focus on hypothesis testing that till the point of time I will not get proof of anything, I will not accept it also. So where is the proof that there is God? And if there is no physical proof of God, no physics based proof of God, right, no science based proof of God, then there is no God. I'll accept only that thing which can be proven with the help of scientific evidences, right? So therefore these kind of people, you can call them that they were ahead of their time, at least in this particular aspect, for example, right? But the society and मतलब ahead of time तो कहना गलत होगा, being religious is not wrong, ठीक है? But the point is कि they are using only what you call as rationality, and they are not using religion, whereas the social practices are a result of religion. You know why they are called social religious reforms? Because without religious reforms there cannot be any social reforms, because social practices were a product of religion. Why widow marriage is not taking place? Because religion says so. So therefore till the point of time you will not reinterpret the religion, till that point of time the reform will also not take place, and these people, they are not doing that, right? Then second point, you can talk about the Brahmo Samaj. So you can mention that it was an organization which was set up by Roy for fulfilling his social reforms, and primary issue that was taken was sati abolition, right? And why he was successful? For example, he used logic as well as religion, used logic plus reason. logic plus religion. Example, proved that sati is murder as per every shastra. Proved that sati is murder as per every shastras. Then you can mention that, and in 1829, finally he convinced the Britishers, William Bentinck, he was convinced to ban sati by law. Second point you can mention that that primary focus was polytheism. And here Roy translated Upanishads. Roy translated Upanishads to prove that Hinduism follow monotheism. To prove Hinduism follow monotheism. Monotheism means all gods are one. One means mono, theology, religion, theo, right? Monotheism. Right? So therefore here we see that there was use of logic also, and there was use of this thing also. Right? Then you can mention that he criticized casteism also. So he said that because there is caste in India, therefore there is no modern nationalism in India, or there is no modern nation in India. Because what is a modern nation? Nation is summation of people who feel one, equal and supreme. So therefore caste divides, so oneness is not able to come. The fraternity of the French Revolution is not able to come. Liberty, equality, fraternity, the fraternity part is not able to be there. Why? Because caste divides, and therefore unity is not there properly among the Indians. So therefore this is how Roy criticized caste. With respect to his logic, for example, he did not believe in doctrine of karma. He did not believe in transmigration of soul. Transmigration में Roy did not believe, but Brahmo Samaj stayed neutral. Why? Because transmigration of soul is a very core principle of Hinduism. आत्मा अजर है, अमर है, शरीर मरता है, आत्मा नहीं मरती है, right? And therefore there will be next birth, the cycle of births. Ultimately there will be nirvana, right? So therefore Brahmo Samaj said that we will not force a Brahmo Samajist to not believe in not believe in transmigration. Fine, since that is a core belief. Basically the idea is, if I say that if you believe in transmigration of soul, then you cannot become member of Brahmo Samaj, then to no one will become member of Brahmo Samaj, or the leadership of the Brahmo Samaj, membership of the Brahmo Samaj will be very, very less. Right? So therefore on doctrine of karma and doctrine of transmigration, Brahmo Samaj adopted a neutral stand. However, Roy followed the aspect of evidence, that what is the evidence that there are multiple births. Right? So therefore he was against it. Similarly, he was against the idea of incarnation, that is God's human birth. Why? Because he will not be able to find any evidences for that. Right? So therefore he suggested, what if there is a clash? So there you can mention that, however, for him logic was infallible. That is logic versus religion. If this fight takes place, then Roy will favor logic. Right? Roy will be here. And Roy will say, if by chance there is no logic in the religion, then change the religion. Right? So it was Swami Dayananda Saraswati for whom Vedas were infallible. Right? But for Roy, logic was infallible. Right? Then in the conclusion part, you can, or in this particular part, you can mention that he studied multiple religions. That is, he studied Christianity. Right? He studied Persian literature also. He studied Sanskrit literature also. And after all of this, he concluded that Vedas are superior, not supreme, superior. Superior means for Hindus. That means there is no requirement for Hindus to convert to other religions. Right? Vedas are superior. And therefore he was cultural nationalist also. Therefore he was cultural nationalist also. Right? Therefore, he was cultural nationalist also, right? So therefore, in the conclusion part, you can mention that initial impetus to the social reforms was given by Young Bengal and Roy. Roy is Brahmo Samaj, and Roy is also called as father of modern India. Later, issues of caste and women were also picked up strongly by future social reformers. You can mention the name of Keshav Chandra Sen, you can mention the name of Swami Vivekananda, Swami Dayananda Saraswati, right? So therefore, that's how the conclusion part it can come, right? So fine, that's a straightforward question. Did Roy ever was able to find one god by logic? नहीं, मतलब he believed in one god, मतलब he is not denying God, he does not believe in atheism, right? So therefore he would believe that there is one power, right, whose physical evidences may be there, but he's not totally finicky about logic. He's trying to find logic in the religion, right? So he believes that whatever is logical is good, but let us not ask the people that your religion is bad or anything. Let us study the religion which the people are following, and if we are able to find the same things which we say are logical in that religion, then tell the people that your social practice is wrong. See, you are dharmic person na, see, your religion does not say that you should do this thing, right? So the chances of social reform will be better. You're like, oh, अभी तक मैं पाप कर रहा था, पाप का पाप कर रहा था, right? So till now I was doing wrong, right? So therefore, please tell me, what does my religion say, right? So therefore, this thing it will be there, right? So chances of, so this is how you can discuss the trace the rise and growth of social reforms, right? This is, so you have mentioned about the tools which are being there, you have mentioned about some organization which has been there, right? So examine the linkages between 19th century's Indian Renaissance and the emergence of national identity. That is, what is the relation between, so if Indian Renaissance took place or if these social reforms took place, the question is about that if these socio-religious reforms they are taking place, so it will have some impacts. It will have some impacts, impact 1, impact 2, impact 3, and so on and so forth, right? They are saying that one of the impact was national identity. हमें इसके बारे में बताओ. So these are my notes. These are my notes. The question is asking about relation between this and this, right? So if our notes are organized in a proper manner, that is what are the reason for the event, what are the consequences of the event, then in that particular case we'll be clearly able to say that, okay, see, this is this part, it is highlighted, right? So what do you mean by national identity? Nation is summation of people, summation of people who feel one, who feel equal, and who feel supreme. Identity. Two aspects are there of identity, right? You also have an identity, right? So therefore, if I ask you that who are you, who you are, tell me about yourself, right? Some people will simply say, my name is this. That's not identity, right? If I'll get into a conversation with you, that is to know who you really are, you'll be telling me that I come from this particular state, from this particular village, right? Then I'll ask more, then you'll tell me that, sir, this is the kind of family from which I come. My father, he does this economic thing, my mother does this economic thing or this household thing. In our village, this particular food is very famous. In our village, this particular festival is celebrated like this. In my state, this particular kind of architecture is very famous. My state is historically famous. I am from that state. मैं उस देश का रहने वाला हूँ, ठीक है? मैं, ठीक है, भारत का रहने वाला हूँ, भारत की बात बताता हूँ, right? So therefore, if you, this question is totally linked or so beautifully linked to that particular song in which Manoj Kumar is there. जब zero दिया मेरे भारत में. Have you heard that song? Right? So there, listen to that song. Go home today and listen to that song, because socio-cultural reforms and art and culture is considered one of the toughest topics. So therefore, just for the sake of understanding that, okay, what is the importance of this art and culture, right? So therefore, if you listen to the lyrics of that particular song, so basically he's telling who he is. ठीक है, मैं उस देश का वासी हूँ, भारत का रहने वाला हूँ, भारत की बात बताता हूँ. That is who we are. And notice that these two things are there. A, he's proud, right? He has the self-respect in who he is, and he knows जब zero दिया मेरे भारत ने, ठीक है? And then rest of the lyrics. So he knows intellectually also, cognitively also, that what are the roots, and he is also proud of those roots, right? Now, because, and therefore we, the Indians, have these common roots, right? National identity. And our national identity was located where? Our national kahan dhoondne jaye who we are? Scriptures. Our ancestors, right? Their knowledge, right? Their way of life, what they thought is right, what they thought is wrong. It was encoded where? It was encoded in the scriptures. It was encoded in the Vedas, in the Upanishads. It was encoded. What is the right way of life? Dharma Shastras. What is the ideal way in which polity should be, governed? Dharma Shastras and other kind of laws which are there, scriptures, right? And because social reformers, they debated on the basis of scriptures. Debate took place on the basis of scriptures. Therefore, scriptures will become famous among the people. As a result, people will become more aware of who we are. Plus, many of the social reformers were cultural nationalists. One example we have just seen of Raja Ramohun Roy. Plus, reformers were cultural nationalists. Therefore, the pride aspect will come. So, pride plus knowledge of roots of India or Indian civilization. That happened during the socio-religious reform movements, and therefore the people of India came to know that, hey, is sati, do our shastras support sati? Nahi karta, right? The present way it is being done, it is not supported, right? Proper debate will take place, right? There you can mention that, for example, so you mentioned that all the social reforms were debated on the basis of scriptures. Why? Because people who used only logic, they could not bring any social reforms because society was deeply religious, right? So therefore, those who were orthodox, that is those who did not want reforms, they also used scriptures. कि हमारा धर्म कहता है सती होना चाहिए, right? That will be said by Dharma Sabha. And those who wanted reforms, they would also say that, see, our scripture says that there should not be any sati, right? So therefore, as a result, people are watching a lawn tennis game. Radhakanta Dev of Dharma Sabha, Katak, right? Udhar se Brahmo Samaj, Raja Ramohun Roy, Patak, right? People are watching match. And people are getting to know, not tennis, but scriptures. Right? Scripture-based debate is taking place. And everyone is anxious who will win. Right? Bentinck was the judge, 1828 to 1835. And he said that Roy is victorious. After Radhakanta Dev wrote to Britain, to Privy Council, that please abolish Sati Abolition Act, but Privy Council rejected the demand, right? So therefore, this is how, the reforms are taking place, right? So, how do you write down the answer then? So therefore, you can write down this introduction, right? This in the introduction, and one paragraph, you can write down that this is the rationale. So you're telling the examiner that I know the rationale of the question, right? I know, and then you can come to the proofs aspect. So therefore, broadly, you can think in your mind that you can talk about, let's say, pre-1857 and post-1857. In your mind, you can think, for example, you begin with, for example, Brahmo Samaj, 1828, or Roy, @ Sati, right? Used scriptures and defeated Dharma Sabha of Radhakanta Dev, right? So Sati based debate with the scripture based debate with the, can mention that he used Upanishads, that is at the rate polytheism. He translated Upanishads, right? He translated Upanishads to prove that Hinduism proposed, Hinduism proposed this thing, atheism. Then there was this. This is this person, Bijoy Goswami. Right? He proved that Vaishnavism is in line with Brahmoism. That is, those who are Vaishnavites, they can join Brahmo Samaj. They are not doing anything wrong. What Vaishnavites believe in, similarly, Brahmoism also believes in the same things. He was a Brahmo Samajist, right? Who was there? Then you can later on mention that with respect to, for example, with respect to child marriage, huge scripture-based debate took place. Huge scripture-based debate took place. Example, R.G. Bhandarkar tried to prove that as per Dharmashastras, Dharmashastras allow marriage post puberty. Right? It allows marriage post puberty. Then at the rate of widow remarriage also. In fact, regarding widow remarriage, you know who won the scripture based debates? The orthodox sections were able to prove that Hinduism does not allow widow marriage. And therefore, social reforms got hurt. Right? Orthodox sections, they won the scripture based debate that Hinduism does not allow widow remarriage. Right? So therefore, in all of these things, these social reforms are taking place. Then point number 6, Swami Dayananda Saraswati, right, and his Arya Samaj, which he set up in the year 1875, right. So therefore, they made Vedas popular like anything, right. They set up the Gurukuls also for study of Vedas. For teaching Vedas, they set up Gurukuls, right? He popularized Vedas, said Vedas are infallible, said real scientific truth is in the Vedas, right? He said Vedas are infallible, real scientific truth, it is in the Vedas. Huh? Arey, Indians ही नहीं, Swami Vivekananda went to US and therefore he acted as the biggest ambassador. Swami Dayananda Saraswati and Swami Vivekananda, right? They are the two people who are credited with respect to acting as brand ambassador of Hinduism, right? So acted as ambassador of Hinduism, and therefore people in US also came to know. Parliament of Religions, Chicago, 1893, Parliament of Religions, right? He conducted seminars. He got so famous, right, and people, they became so attached to his teachings, right, that he was called in different parts of US that please tell us about your thoughts, right. He also set up an organization. Both of them, they set up organization. He also set up Ramakrishna Mission. Example, he highlighted that service of Jiva is worship of Shiva, and therefore he converted the knowledge of our religion, it talks about what you call as social service, right? Our religion is pro-poor religion. Those are the ethics of our religion. This will be the thought process of majority population of India, right? So therefore, this is how popularized religion provide the goodness of the religion, told that how all of these social ills, they are not, like Swami Dhyana Saraswati was totally against idol worship, totally against any kind of ritual, totally against dip in the holy rivers, totally against casteism, totally in favor of intercaste marriage. He was a radical social reformer, right? So therefore, and he's great expert of Vedas also. So therefore, they are going to prove that all of these negative things, they are not part of our scriptures, right? So therefore, see, all of you will get to know that what do our Vedas say, what do Upanishads say, plus you will develop pride also. They are also cultural nationalists, right? So therefore, this is how you can highlight that how the social reforms, they resulted in development of a cultural national identity. And conclusion में, my favorite dialogue, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, he declared that Swami Vivekananda is spiritual father of modern Indian national movement, spiritual father of INM in Bengal. You cannot fight anti-British struggle till the point of time you have pride in your culture, who you are, in your identity. पैर लड़खड़ा जाएंगे, उतना झील नहीं आ पाएगा. जब तक pride in culture नहीं होगी, you will not be able to become Sunil Shetty of Bhuvi border. Ma Shakti Dhum. So no. So cultural nationalism provides energy. There are two elements: emotion, that is called patriotism, and mental, non-emotional, mental knowledge. Both of these things were result of social reforms, right? Proven by Netaji Bose. Swami Vivekananda is spiritual father, means cultural, spiritual, cultural father of political INM, because no political anti-British struggle can take place till the point of time in your heart you will not feel pride for being an Indian, right? So therefore, who we are from that particular this thing, right? So therefore, this can be conclusion, right? Then next question that you have is this. So social reforms are over. So moderate phase. To what extent did the role of moderates prepare a base for wider freedom movement? To what extent? That means we need to act as a judge also. That what were their failures also, we have to look. What were their success also, we have to look, right? Prepare a base for wider freedom movement. Wider freedom movement. Wider means more and more number of people joining the Indian national movement, right? So therefore, in this answer, I would say prepare a base for wider freedom movement. So I would say intellectually, yes, wider, right? That is the narrative. Two elements are there in anti-British struggle. One aspect is what you call as the narrative aspect, right? They have a narrative of white man's burden. BMW opposite WMB, white man's burden, that they are here to help us, modernize us. White man's burden versus colonialism. So are they looting us or they are here to develop us? Here they had great success. Here the moderates, they had great success. Why? Because they were the proponents of the drain theory. That means if they were chess players, then they played chess very well. But they are not cricket players, they are not football players. They don't like to sweat it out. They like to be in the racy chambers, right? You are moderate. In your UPSC preparation, you are moderate. You all the day you stay there in your room, in your studying in library, etc. And then today I am very agitated. मैं क्या करें? ऐसा आर्टिकल लिख डालूंगा. करूँ काम चाहिए. That is your max level of agitation. You will never do any kind of, you will never break any law, because after that, the court case will be there and you will be disqualified from UPSC exam. Right? So moderates will always stay legal. Their agitation, whenever they say, that protests were launched and you are before 1905, that protest means paper फाड़ दिया आज लिख लिख के, ठीक है ना. So therefore there is, ठीक है ना, narrative वाला aspect. However, when you talk about the actual participation, that is masses in INM, that is job of a leader is to bring masses in the Indian national movement. So here they were, in fact they never, failure क्या, failure तो वहां बोलते हैं ना जहां पे तुम attempt करते हो. They did not have any faith in masses. That is, they did not want a mass-based, Indian national movement, right? They did not have faith in masses, and therefore did not develop or failed to develop mass movement. Failed to develop mass movement. मतलब broadly मैं आपको बता दे रहा हूँ कि this can serve as your introduction also, right? This overall understanding can give you introduction, right? That because our question is to what extent moderates were able to build a base for a wider freedom movement, right? So therefore, in the introduction itself, you can mention that moderate methods did not believe in participation of masses in street protests to raise their demands, and therefore they were limited to 3 P's: prayer, petition, protest in newspapers. Prayer, petition, protest in newspapers, right? So therefore they were successful in defeating the narrative, white man's burden narrative of the British, by giving a critique of colonialism, especially the drain theory. However, they did not have faith in the masses and therefore failed to expand the base of the Indian national movement, right? So therefore this is the overall scenario which is there. And then accordingly, here on the positive sides of the moderates, right? So here you can begin that moderates, for example, even pre-INC, they raised demands against introduction of income tax in 1860s, right? Plus they campaigned for Indianization of civil services. They campaigned for decrease in military expenditure. Decrease in military expenditure. They wanted decrease in land revenue, right? So this is what they are majorly doing, right? Plus campaigned against Lytton's Afghan adventure in the newspapers, obviously. Campaigned against Arms Act 1878, which was brought by Lytton. Campaigned against Vernacular Press Act 1878, which was brought by Lytton. Plus supported Ilbert Bill, which was brought in 1882-83 by Ripon. 1882-83, Ilbert Bill controversy was there. Ilbert Bill basically gave Indian judges at the district level power to be judge in cases which involve Firangis, right? So therefore, this was the, in one line, you can mention that moderates pre-INC also, they criticized the British rule. And then second point to write down, that from 1885 till 1920, moderates, they dominated INC. And INC, right, raised following demands. Or simply, INC raised demands of Indians. And then you come to, because space हमारे पास कम रहेगा, because हमें थोड़ा सा negative बोलना है. However, major contribution, ठीक है, raised demands of Indians. And however, Indian Councils Act of 1892 did not give did not meet limited self-government demand of moderates. Indian Council Act of 1892 did not meet, right? Therefore, here they failed. Here they failed. But this failure laid foundation of their success, laid foundation of their true success, or laid foundation of their success in countering narrative of white man's burden, in countering narratives of white man's burden. And then you start talking about drain theory. They gave drain theory. You can mention certain names: R.C. Dutt, then your this thing, R.C. Dutt, M.G. Ranade, Dada Bhai Naroji, right? And they, via drain theory, they proved, via drain theory, they proved that British looting India post IR. And then you can mention some of the components of the drain theory, right? They proved that India is now a source of raw material and an export market. They criticized that how the Britishers are not placing any import duty, right, to maximize the sale of goods, right? मतलब ड्रेन थ्योरी अब यहाँ पे पूरा क्या डिस्कस करना है इसमें, मतलब बोल सकते हैं हम तो ड्रेन थ्योरी में यू कैन मेंशन व्हाट. सो बेसिकली इंडिया इज इक्वल टू source of RM and EM. No import duty is put to protect the Indian manufacturers. Exchange rate which is favorable to British. Exports, right? If there's depreciation of currency, then exporters they benefit, right? So they artificially used to keep the British pound depreciated compared to the Indian rupee, right? So that the British exporters they benefit. Salaries of the Secretary of State, of the India Council, right, of the British soldiers. High military expenditure, then railways, that is foreign direct investment, guaranteed interest on railways, that means all profits are of the British, all losses are of the Indians. ये तो बड़ी famously discuss करता है, हर teacher discuss करता है, right? ठीक है, तो railways is there. No irrigation in permanent settlement areas. Right? So that is what is, all of these things, multiple things, depends आप कितना वहाँ पे space है. But basically overall this question is not about drain theory, therefore you would have to mention the drain theory in kind of like a summary, the key highlights of the drain theory, but the primary focus is this. And on the negative side you can mention that they on the negative side you can mention that there is that their method was of petitions, did not involve masses because masses were not educated, therefore lagged modern nationalism. Masses involvement, it can lead to violence, and these people did not have the ideology of violent struggle or anything. They believed in constitutionalism, etc. Right? So aisa. So this is what is there. And in conclusion, you can mention that, well, in the conclusion part, you can mention that their primary achievements are three. काश याद आ जाए तीन. ऐसे तो बोल तो दिया मैंने, पहले बोला था. First is foundation of INC. Second is what you call as Dane theory. And third is Indian Councils Act 1892, but which was a failure, right? So fine, दो ही इनकी मतलब बेसिस है. हाँ, एक थर्ड हम बोल सकते हैं कल्चर ऑफ पार्लियामेंट्री पॉलिटिक्स और प्रोजेक्ट ऑफ नेशन बिल्डिंग. Project of nation building. Example, held sessions in different parts, and the person who will be president of that session will not be from that region. So build all India level. It is a project of nation building they began, right? And they also what you call as began parliamentary politics or culture of parliamentary politics. Culture of parliamentary politics. How many of you have not attended, have not been my students? Raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. Huh? So what is this culture of parliamentary politics? Because my students know. That's why I was asking. Culture of parliamentary politics is that, for example, if you are moderates, right, and a meeting of the Indian National Congress is taking place, right, so therefore you'll not be talking, you will not be talking randomly, right? No. First, you're going to stand up, right, and you randomly, president of the INC session will act as like speaker, and Mr. So and so, please stand up. Then Mr. So and so will stand up, and you will not start randomly speaking. First, you have to turn left and right. ऐसा, ठीक है? Greet everyone, right? And after that, you have to use parliamentary language. That is sophisticated English, right? Randomly, you cannot say कि भैया ये गलत हो रहा है, अगर भैया नहीं चलेगा. ठीक है, right? So therefore you have to use parliamentary language, right? And after that you have to give proper reasons, and while giving the speech बीच में ऐसे घूमता रहना है, ठीक है, सबको. You have to address everyone, and then after that whatever your proposal is, it has to be brought through a motion, right? And then voting will take place, है? And voting के time पे ऐसा नहीं yes we are in favor, yes no, ऐसा नहीं. I, if you are in favor you will say I, ठीक है, AYEI, ठीक है, and you will say nay, NAY या no, ठीक है, ऐसा yes no नहीं बोल देना है. बट इन पार्लियामेंट में वो I कहते हैं, I, ठीक है, yes नहीं कहते, ठीक है. तो ऐसा प्रॉपर वोटिंग शुड बी देयर, राइट? एंड देन दी मोशन विल बी पास्ड, राइट? और ऑर्डर ऑफ बिजनेस विल बी देयर. मतलब बेसिकली दे आर लाइक कि दूल्हा तैयार है, ऐसा ना हो दैट पेरेंट्स एग्री फॉर मैरिज and then we are found unprepared, right? So we were like already practicing all of this parliamentary politics, and therefore we wanted council reforms, that the Britishers should expand the councils, and tab koi deri nahi, we are already prepared, right? So culture of parliamentary politics, etc., it was begun by them, that is democratic functioning and orderly functioning in this particular manner, right? So therefore this is what is there. 8 बज गए, एक सेकेंड, कितने क्वेश्चन रह गए अभी? बहुत रह गए, ऐसे मत बोलो. तो कोई नहीं, एक आधा तो ऐसे निपटा देंगे, ठीक है? अरे मतलब जो बहुत कॉमन है, जैसे ये वाला क्वेश्चन. हाँ, इवेलुएट द पॉलिसीज ऑफ कर्जन एंड देयर लॉन्ग टर्म इम्पैक्ट ऑन नेशनल मूवमेंट्स, राइट? सो दिस क्वेश्चन इज टोटली स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड, राइट? तो बेसिकली impact of Curzon is that Curzon, first of all, the student should know what are the policies of Curzon, right? And these policies, they basically resulted in anger, and anger is good, right? Anger will lead to stronger INM. Anger will lead to stronger Indian national movement. What are these policies? For example, Indian Universities Act of 1904. It brought universities under control because Curzon had the view that no more the Western education is creating brown sahibs who are loyal to British, but now Western education is basically leading to sedition. That is, youth is becoming more and more nationalist and anti-British. So he wanted to bring universities under control, right? Example, reduce the number of PhDs, reduce the tenure of the PhDs. Basically, he is against campus politics, right? Second point, for example, he brought Calcutta Municipal Corporation Amendment Act, right? Calcutta Municipal Corporation Amendment Act. This was brought in 1899. Basically, it reduced the number of elected members. That means there was a person called Ripon 8084 1880-84 who is called father of local cell government. Huh? That person is bringing elected members to majority, and here this person who is opposite, right? So obviously when he is acting in anti-democratic manner, that is going to lead to anger, right? Third, for example, Curzon, what he did, his major decision was what you call as Bengal partition, right, which was brought in 1905. This was Bengal partition was basically, what was the goal? Goal was to basically play divide and rule and weaken the Indian national movement. Weaken the Indian national movement. That is, what was done was this. And those students, right, who have not studied from me, and I think that this can benefit you, right? So basically what is being done is this, that imagine that this is Assam. Assam was a union territory at that point of time, and this is Bengal, right? Imagine that this is your Bihar, this is your East Bengal, right? And this is your West Bengal. I know Odisha it is there, but fine, we'll keep Odisha here, right? So what was the Bengal partition was that they created this, and they called it EBA, East Bengal and Assam. East Bengal and Assam. And this is now going to be called as West Bengal. This is going to be called West Bengal. So prelims ke perspective say West Bengal legally is not just West Bengal, it is Bihar plus West Bengal plus Odisha, right? So this is being done, right? So as a result, now Bengalis were a minority in EBA. Muslims are in EBA, Hindus are in majority. In minority. Hindus in minority, right? And Indian national movement was led initially by the Hindus. In Bengal, Bengalis will be in minority, and Indian national movement was led by Bengalis, right? Bengal, because Calcutta used to be capital, so Bengalis, they were more prominent leaders, and also in Bengal, at least, Bengalis obviously, they are the leaders. Odia speakers and Maithili speakers or Bhojpuri speakers, they are not the INM leaders to begin with, right? So therefore, now tomorrow, if you want to launch any campaign in West Bengal, how many people will join your campaign? Majority is not with you. You want to fight elections, let's say in future, some council reforms come, you will be able to become MLA? Answer is no. Even when MP election, by chance, if let's say in future takes place in direct elections, that means politically you will become weak. And here also you will not be able to win. Plus, the Britishers, they wanted, it is a Muslim majority province. So Britishers, they played divide and rule. That is, they wanted to get support of elite Muslims. Elite Muslim support. Why? Because it is a Muslim majority province. So tomorrow, if some seats are allocated at the province level, or at the center level to this particular East Bengal and Assam, so who will benefit? It is the elite Muslims who will benefit, right? So therefore it was a ploy of divide and rule, and therefore this triggered what you call as the Swadeshi movement, right? Then you can write down a brief sum. Swadeshi movement is most commonly done movement, तो उस पे मैं नहीं जा रहा हूँ भी, but what is more important is the impact. Impact is that for the first time masses are participating. Impact is that for the first time new methods are coming. First time masses participated, first time the workers, they participated, right? New methods are coming. For example, non-cooperation as a method, civil disobedience as a method, constructive work as a method is also coming, right? So new methods are coming. First time these things are happening. Apart from this, use of plays or jatras, picketing of shops, selling liquor, etc., right? Promotion of Swadeshi education, setting up of Swadeshi enterprises, right? Formation of samitis, for raising awareness, right? So therefore the whole Indian national movement is method wise, the Indian national movement is turning, plus method goal wise also. The Indian National Congress in 1906 adopted the goal of Swaraj. Earlier the goal was of limited self-government, now the goal is of Swaraj. So therefore Curzon's policies are generating such anger that ultimately there is a huge shift in the goals as well as in the methods of the Indian national movement, right? So in fact during this time period, not as part of the movement but later on, for example from 1907 till 1911, even guns came out. That is revolutionaries, they also came out. So see, revolutionary methods are present, Gandhian methods are present, use of jatras, right, prabhat fairies, right, use of religion, मतलब वो तो खैर चलो न्यू मेथड नहीं है, but yes, use of religion to motivate the people, to bring energy into the people, right? So therefore a lot of huge impact is happening, and all of these things were used later by Mahatma Gandhi. Except for violence, all of these things were used later by Mahatma Gandhi, and therefore the Indian national movement changed forever after this, right? So that is the aspect of this thing. Then you have this question, Gandhian era. What was the difference between Mahatma Gandhi and Tagore? So with respect to this question, the categories can be formed with respect to their ideology. Right? So if we talk about what you call as the, in their approach towards education and nationalism, right? So with respect to, for example, if we create something like this, Mahatma Gandhi and Tagore, right? So with respect to education, focus or goal of education for Mahatma Gandhi was basically Atma Shakti. That is, ultimately a person should feel self-empowered. He should feel self-empowered morally also, right? Spiritually also self-empowered. So therefore, he'll be focusing on what you call as, there should be religious education also. That is, focus on spirituality should also be there as part of the education. That is one aspect, right? Because Mahatma Gandhi always believed in constructive work, promoted khadi, right? So therefore focus should be on skill development. That is skilling in the handicraft sector. That is vocational training in the handicraft sector. You can also mention, for example, the Vardha scheme. There is a small Vardha scheme of education which was brought in 1937, right, by Zakir Hussain committee, whereby vocational training, learning by doing, these kind of things. So this was inspired by Gandhian ideology. With respect to Tagore, the focus was on, for example, logic or reasoning. A lot of focus should be there. And second, focus on, for example, linguistic aesthetics. That is, slightly like poetic also, aesthetism, right? So therefore music, literature, dance, right? That is linguistic ethics plus art, right? Music. So they should be focused on these two things, right? So therefore that was the primary thing. Apart from that, with respect to place of education, right? So Gandhiji believed in community. That is, place of education should be community. Place of education, it should be community setting. Example, learning by doing, right? Or school community contact. That is, school children, they should visit the community, so therefore that they have some real life experiences also. Tagore, for example, he believed in nature. That is, study should not take place in like total concrete things and classrooms, right? You should be present in the nature, right? So therefore kind of like similarity it is there, but more people focus here like natural setting, that is go out to kind of find this is kind of a similar thing which is present. Then apart from this thing, right, तो ये है with respect to another aspect, religion. So focus that Mahatma Gandhi used to say that Gandhi ji, matlab, he is in favor of religion in education, right? He said ki matlab, have ethics, but not over focus on religion. Have ethics from religion but not over focus on religion. This was a scenario should be there, right? So then in curriculum, this thing was there with respect to Gandhiji. Gandhiji believed that different curriculum should be there for the different genders, different for girls and boys, right? Whereas Tagore, he believed in what you call as same curriculum, right? So Gandhiji somewhat believed in gender roles also, that stereotype thoda bahut kehte hain Gandhiji ka tha. So that is one of the aspect. Apart from that, for example, if you talk about approach towards nationalism, so key difference between them is A, Rabindranath Tagore does not favor national boundaries. He believes that concept of nationalism, it divides human race, right? So therefore he is against the concept of nationalism. Whereas Mahatma Gandhi, right, so he was what you call as, he is a nationalist, he is a cultural nationalist, right? Though believes in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, but it's right. So therefore this kind of scenario it is there, right? He criticized the Western concept of nationalism also, right? So in that sense, so both are in the sense. So he is an internationalist. He believes that the whole human race is a nation, right? In the case of Rabindranath Tagore, right? So that is what is there. Apart from this, so internationalism can be another aspect, that he also believes in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, right? But here primary focus is internationalism, right? तो इस तरीके से ये वाला क्वेश्चन जो है आंसर हो सकता है. अब हो गए 8-18.
Are you struggling to understand ethical theories and their practical applications? Many UPSC aspirants face this challenge when preparing for the Ethics Mains paper. To aid aspirants conquer it, Vision IS presents the Ethics Case Studies classes from 30th June, 5 p.m. Master the fundamentals of ethics with a clear, structured approach. Stay ahead by interlinking topics with current events and real-world scenarios.
One question is, bring out the constructive programs of Mahatma Gandhi during non-cooperation movement and civil disobedience movement. This question is totally straightforward. I will tell you how it is straightforward, not just because we are short of time, but I will tell you. So basically in the 1920 Calcutta special session, right, the program, it happened in September, where the Congress decided that they will start non-cooperation movement. In that, Mahatma Gandhi said the first phase of non-cooperation movement, for 1 year we will do non-cooperation, and that will include, we will use panchayats and we will boycott the courts. Using panchayats is constructive work. It is Swadeshi courts. We will use khadi and we will boycott British cloth. We will do anti-liquor campaign. We will start anti-untouchability campaign. We will focus on Hindu-Muslim unity, right? So therefore, it was clearly straightforward. Then when Gandhiji began the civil disobedience movement in 1930, initially it was decided that we will wait for the Britishers to give us dominion status, but this is happening in December 1928. But if the Britishers, they do not give us dominion status in 1 year, then we'll launch a civil disobedience movement and we'll have Purn Swaraj as our goal. This is December 1928 decision. Gandhiji knew that most probably Britishers, they will obviously not meet this demand, but Gandhiji did not want any kind of violence. And Gandhi used to use this constructive work for training the people in non-violent satyagraha. Therefore, in a constructive work resolution was passed in December 1928 session. Why? Because Gandhiji wanted to prepare the masses in non-violent struggle, non-violent satyagraha, training in satyagraha. There, what are the features? Right. So there, the features was boycott foreign cloth, promote khadi, focus on self-help, that is self-skill development, education, anti-liquor campaign, anti-untouchability campaign, ending disabilities for women, that is focus on women empowerment. Also focus on training in satyagraha, also focus on organizational work. Right. So basically, a student, right, who is in the domain of making notes that I have to notice a pattern, तो वो स्टूडेंट एक जगह अगर लिखेगा कंस्ट्रक्टिव वर्क की ये दो चीज, तो ठीक है, तो आराम से ये उसके अंदर हो जाएगा. राइट. Obviously, you can mention the focus or what is the benefit of constructive work. In the conclusion, matlab ask by 2-3 paragraphs because it is a 250 word. So positives of constructive work. So it basically, constructive work, it leads to what you call as Atma Shakti. Atma Shakti, it has another word called self-reliance. How the self-reliance comes? Because it leads to education. Plus there is focus on skill development. Therefore focus is on employment. That is economic Atma Shakti. Apart from this, spiritual education is also given because Hare Ka Sahara, Khatu Sham Hamara. This is like one of the important slogan of a subsect of, let's say, the Hindu community, right? So why am I saying this? When the poor person logically sees that there is neither any economic or other kind of proof that I can do well in life, ultimately the reliance is on God. And if we feel that God is with us, then we will believe that maybe change is possible, right? So therefore spirituality, it basically leads to confidence to the poor. And therefore focus on Atma Shakti, it is there, right? This is what is there. Plus apart from this, it is not just individual Atma Shakti, but it is also community Atma Shakti, that is community unity. So basically in this particular case, there is focus on Hindu-Muslim unity, there is focus on women empowerment, there is focus on upper caste, lower caste unity. Now this constructive work will not just bring good things to the society in the social domain, but it will also lead to what you call as political benefits. It also leads to political benefits. Why? If this community is united, right, then the community will jointly participate in a political movement also. If women are empowered through the social work, then women will participate in a political movement also, right? So number of people who are participants in my political movement, that will also get a great boost, right? So this is what is there. Plus you can mention that through constructive work, Gandhiji used to focus on training in satyagraha to keep the movement what you call as non-violent, right? So therefore it is with the help of those two resolutions and with the help of this, you can answer this particular question. Then you have, since the decade of 1920s, the national movement acquired various ideological strands and thereby expanded its social base, right? So here, what would be the thought process which will be there? Various ideological strands, if we discuss. So ideology wise, for example, so since 1920s, different ideological stands, they came up in, right? So for one ideology, we can talk about Gandhian ideology, right? And in Gandhian ideology, we can talk about non-violent extra-constitutional mass struggle, right? It resulted in what you call as high participation of the masses, right? Plus there was high focus on morality, which also resulted in more participation of women. Why? Because Gandhiji is a Mahatma, so men of the house will not have a problem if women they participate in a Gandhian struggle because some kind of more legitimacy it is attached to the tag of Mahatma. Then Gandhian ideology was also very, very inclusive ideology, right? Gandhiji was deeply inclusive. As a result, there was focus on more participation of the people, right? For example, he focused on Hindu Muslim unity in the non-cooperation movement. He supported the Khilafat movement, right? He wanted to have capitalists also. So, for example, in the civil disobedience movement, the capitalists they participated for the first time, right? In the Rowlatt Satyagrah, working class participated. In fact, CAK, Champaran, Ahmedabad, Kheda, Ahmedabad mill strike was one of the first protest which he launched in Ahmedabad, and that laid the foundation of All India Trade Union Congress later on in 19, but यहाँ पे अहमदाबाद टेक्सटाइल मिल एसोसिएशन इस टाइप से बना था, राइट? सो देयरफॉर ही वाज अ सपोर्टर ऑफ द वर्कर्स आल्सो. ही वाज इंक्लूसिव टुवर्ड्स पेजेंट्स. He is participants in Champaran Satyagrah, Kheda Satyagrah, Bardoli Satyagrah of 1928. That is, he was very sensitive towards the issues of the peasants also. So he was greatly respected by all the communities, and therefore that resulted in great positives for the Indian national movement because it expanded the social base like anything, because focus is on the social base. Apart from that, Gandhiji was also a great organizer. The first thing that he does after takeover of Congress is 1920 Nagpur session. He reorganizes the Congress. He sets up Congress working committee so that the movement goes on even when the leader is arrested, right? He set up provincial Congress committees so that at the province level also Congress branches are present to conduct any movement in a organized manner, right? Obviously, when organization will be there, then participation will definitely be much better, because then at village level also you can become a Congress karyakarta. At district level also you can become a Congress karyakarta. Proper communication is happening, right? You can visit your village level Congress party office and you're like, हाँ भाई, next movement when? So much amount of economic issues are there. Are we doing something, right? So obviously the participation of the masses, it will increase. Second paragraph that you can talk about was leftism, right? And there you can mention that after the Russian Revolution of October 1917, USSR was set up in 1920, and therefore there was rise of communism all across the world, and India was no exception. Communist Party of India was first set up in USSR in Tashkent in 1920. Then it was again set up in India in 1925, which is proof of increasing popularity of communism, right? Plus, the Communist Party started organizing the workers and the peasants into workers and peasants parties, WPPs, workers and peasant parties, right? Apart from that, the workers, because workers are enthusiastic right now, right? So therefore, workers, they also strongly became part of Indian national movement. For example, you can mention that in Rowlatt Satyagrah 1919, strong participation of workers was there. In non-cooperation movement as well as in civil disobedience movement, decent participation was there, right? Very high participation was not there in CDM and Quit India movement because CPI opposed it, but fine, that is there. Then you can also mention that there was influence of what you call as communism even on the revolutionaries of 1920s. Example, Bhagat Singh was a Marxist, and he defined independence not just as political independence but also as independence from economic oppression. So that is there. Then there was rise of capitalism also, right? Since the time period of moderates were supporters of capitalism, and in 1927, for example, FICCI was set up. Capitalists participated for the first time in which movement? In civil disobedience movement, right? So therefore they were also kind of like supporting, they are also participant in the INM, right? Then another ideology which is coming is of women empowerment, thanks to the work of Mahatma Gandhi. And now leaders are like Sarojini Naidu, right? They play important role. In Government of India Act 1919, they are able to extract right to vote for the women for the first time. In 1935, they are able to extract reservation for women also, right? So therefore, and in Quit India movement, Aruna Asaf Ali, Sucheta Kriplani, They participated in underground activity also, that is revolutionary activities also, right? In 1930-33, women were part of Chittagong armory raid of Surya Sen, right? So therefore women empowerment issues coming, and a negative ideology is also coming in the form of communalism, right? So rise of Muslim League from 1905 onwards, separate electorates in 1909 that contributed to communism also, that hurt. So not just expanded the social base, but some ideologies also hurt the social base. Lastly, you can mention that the backward caste movements began, right? So Gandhiji made anti-untouchability a major issue, right? First in the non-cooperation movement, and then the second phase of civil disobedience movement was totally about Harijan Sevak Sangh starting Harijan Sevak campaign, anti-Harijan campaign, right? And later you can mention about B.R. Ambedkar ji, that B.R. Ambedkar, right, he campaigned for political and economic rights of the workers. He was able to secure double reservation for the scheduled caste through the Pune Pact of 1932 with Gandhiji, right? Then you can mention that Gandhiji also started temple entry movements in the south, वाईकॉम सत्याग्रह, है ना, उस तरीके से सेल्फ रिस्पेक्ट मूवमेंट ऑफ ईवी रामास्वामी नायकर, राइट? सो ऐसा एक ऐसा बोल सकते हो, ठीक है? तो इस तरीके से दिस क्वेश्चन इट कैन बी आंसर्ड, राइट? एंड सिमिलरली दिस क्वेश्चन इज वेरी वेरी सिमिलर to this question also. Many voices had strengthened, because in this also I'll mention the same things, right? Slightly word proportion in favor of ideology will be more in the first question. Here it will be more in the participants, and here we can give examples also like Bhagat Singh, right? or मतलब answer kind of काफी कुछ हद तक same रहेगा, थोड़ा सा proportion रहेगा. And last question is this: assess the role of British imperial power in complicating the process of transfer of power during the 1940s. So how did they complicate the process? Ultimately, they are not able to keep India united, right? And they are creating a lot of complications. Transfer of power demand began with beginning of the World War II. What do you mean by transfer of power? Transfer of power means transfer of executive power. That means make us ministers, have an Indian prime minister, and convert viceroy into a powerless president. That is the meaning of transfer of power, right? And we said Indian National Congress. So in the introduction part here you can mention is that when the World War II began, so therefore India was made part of the World War II without our consent, and therefore Indian National Congress demanded immediate transfer of power. Indian National Congress demanded immediate transfer of power if British want war support. How the Indian National Congress will support the Britishers in the war? A, by asking the people to pay taxes on time. B, asking the workers to not start any strikes. C, asking the Indian youth to join the British Indian Army. D, not starting any no tax campaign, asking the ryots to pay land revenue on time, right? So therefore this is how the Indian National Congress, it can support the Britishers in the war effort, right? So that's how the story of transfer of power began. Now how do they complicate this, right? So second point here you can mention is that right, the second point here you can mention is that World War II was for democracy. World War II was for democracy and against fascism, that is against dictatorship. But British did not want to transfer power to the Indians. The British did not want democracy, and in this process they complicated and ultimately ended up partitioning India. Third point, for example, here you can mention what is the process. अब इधर ध्यान दो, ठीक है? What is the process which is there? In the August offer 1940, what is the complication there? अबे रुक जा, अबे सुन, लास्ट है और ये इस तरफ थोड़ा सा फायदा हो जाएगा, ठीक है? तो मतलब ये ऐसा इसमें देखो, ठीक है? बस सही में होगा, ऐसा कुछ वो नहीं है, ठीक है? राइट. For example, in the August offer 1940, what is the complication they are bringing? Not many people are clear, but easily I can create a prelims question also out from here. The complication that they are bringing here is that there will be veto to Muslim League. There'll be veto to Muslim League, but where? At the rate drafting of constitution. Constitution will be drafted after the war. We'll give you dominion status after the war, right? And veto to Muslim League at the rate drafting of the constitution. You know what is the meaning of this? The meaning of this is she will stand up and she will say, let there be the first article that India, there shall be a union of India. All the people will vote. Muslim League members who are present in the Constituent Assembly, they will vote no. And therefore this first article itself will not be able to become part of the constitution. That means lock, complication, baat aage badhegi nahi. No one will be able to move towards Article 2 also, because Indian National Congress will say this article must be there, and Jinnah will say leke rahenge Pakistan, right? So therefore complication ho gaya. How transfer of power properly will take place ultimately later on if this kind of logjam it is there. That is the issue. Second, they gave us dominion status only, promised dominion, whereas our demand was full independence, right? So this is the complication that they are bringing, right? Then the second complication, जिसकी वजह से इसको रोका मैंने, comes the Cripps mission, 1942. In the Cripps mission, what is the complication they are bringing in? Acha, another complication, in the Cripps mission 1942, what complication they are bringing? The complication that they are bringing in is A, no veto at the rate drafting of constitution, no veto at the rate drafting of constitution, but once the constitution is framed, so step number 1, COI for India. Step number 2, now any province and any princely state can come out of union, that is can secede. So in step number 1, India will be formed, but in step number 2, the MLAs of Muslim League, wherever they are in majority, let's say if they are majority in Bengal, then Bengal can say that we do not want to be part of India, will come out of it. Matlab, theoretically, it is possible that how many Indias will be there theoretically? There are 571 princely states, plus there are 11 provinces. That means they were creating 582 Indias. So the original member, if someone says Tukde Tukde gang, so original member of Tukde Tukde gang is Mr. Cripps. Wanted to divide India into theoretically 582 parts, right? So constitution will be formed, but later you can come out of the constitution. So this is creation of complexity. Okay. Plus he is saying that no democracy in princely states, that is there will be nominees from princely states in the Constituent Assembly, right? So therefore this is the complexity that they are bringing. Then next point you see, after this comes next complexity, Wavell Plan. Wavell Plan comes in 1945. What is the complexity here? Wavell Plan is this. In the Viceroy's Executive Council, all Indians will be there except 2 people. A, the Governor General, and B, the Commander-in-Chief. Ye Indians honge. That means they will be 50% what you call as Hindus and 50% Muslims. This is what the Wavell Plan is after the end of the World War II, right? Muslim League says Muslims will come only from Muslim League because only Muslim League is representative of Muslims. Indian National Congress says no. We also have Muslim members. Indian National Congress is representative of Indians, right? And we are Indian first and Hindu Muslim later. Wavell says what? Wavell gave status of Dulhan to Muslim League. Because Muslim League could not be convinced by you, Mr. Indian National Congress, this here INC here INC दोनों जगह हो सकता है, because you could not convince दुल्हन, therefore sorry, plan is failed. This is known as giving implicit veto. Implicit means indirect veto to ML. That means no constitutional progress, no transfer of power will take place to Indians if Congress is unable to convince Jinnah. Right? So therefore that is the complexity which is being brought. After this comes what you call as cabinet mission plan. In the cabinet mission plan of 1946, look what khichdi they are preparing. They are creating a Pakistan within India. They are creating a Pakistan within India. There will be a Union of India. And this Union of India will be having a Constitution of India. But this Constitution of India will end before it starts. Because it will be only on three things: defense, communications, and foreign affairs. Today when you read Lakshmikant, so don't you feel that Lakshmikant could have been two books? They shall be prime minister, they shall be president. सब पढ़ लिया, लगा book खत्म. They shall be governor, they shall be chief minister. है ना? ऐसा तो repeat हो रहा है अब. Right? So who said that there has to be only single constitution for a country? For the central list of subjects, there can be one constitution, and for the state list of subjects, there can be another constitution. So this constitution will be only on defense, communication, foreign affairs. Then India will be divided into a Pakistan. Matlab provinces. These are Muslim majority provinces of West. These are Hindu majority provinces. These are Muslim majority provinces of East. Right? This will be called Group C. This will be called Group A. And this will be called Group B. They will have their own constitution. There will be a constitution B, or there will be what you call as COI B. There will be a COI A. There will be a COI C. Right? Plus, there are 571 princely states. Their wish whether they want to have a constitution or no constitution. Okay. How many constitutions? At max, how many constitutions? Let's say all of them decide we'll have constitution. 571, 572, 573, 574, 575. कह रहे 575 कॉन्स्टिट्यूशंस होंगे. क्या बवाल है. Right? Obviously this is complication. Right? And C plus B is a Pakistan within India. Right? That is very weak center. And this is what they are doing. Right? So they are complicating the process. Right? Plus you can enter some more details. Example, look at this complication. Assam was made part of this, whereas Assam only had 31% Muslims. Why? Because of politics. Because otherwise the East Pakistan will be very small, something like this. So they are complicating this process, right? And lastly you have what? Lastly you have this Dickey. Dickey, Mountbatten, his nickname was Dickey. Dickey Bird Plan. Imagine had we been colonial power, right? And if my name had been Chintu at my home and I had become, let's say, Mountbatten, right? Then British students studying in their school and for their British civil service exam also, चिंटू पंछी प्लान, चिंटू पंछी के क्या है? डिकी बर्ड. एक तो उनके सरने बड़े अजीब से होते हैं, ठीक है. एनीवेज, डिकी बर्ड प्लान, चिंटू प्लान, मतलब निकनेम. मतलब इफ यू हैव पावर देन ऑन योर निकनेम आल्सो. बेसिकली इट वाज व्हाट? गिव इंडिपेंडेंस टू एवरीवन. क्या सबको आजाद कर खत्म करो काम. Those who want to come together, they will come together. Those who do not want to come together, they will not come together. Right? This plan was not even discussed. Right? That is 1947. After he came out with MTV plan, which is also known as 3rd June Plan of 1947, right? So fine, in the 3rd June Plan, ultimately what? Complication is what? Complication is what? Nothing but it resulted in partition, right? But what is the complication? The complication is officially, legally, this is the last sentence, officially, each princely state, officially, each princely state had legally, officially and legally, each princely state had right to be an independent country. Each. Legally. Unofficially, we will not allow them to be independent. अरे वाह, ये क्या बात है button? Officially, each princely state. That's what Travancore said. Travancore's prime minister was educated prime minister, C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer. He said that I have studied everything and legally I have the right to be fully independent. So therefore I am declaring independence. Right. So Maharaja Thirunal will accept whatever his prime minister will say. He was right. So unofficially I'll make a speech to the princes that please join India. Unofficially India will be as large as possible. ये क्या बकवास है? Right. But therefore you are creating a challenge for Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Why don't you simply say that all the princes said they will be part of India? As simple as that. Right? No, this जो वादा किया वो निभाना पड़ेगा. Butler Committee, 1927. Report came in 1929. Britishers promised the princes that without your consent, Lajo, I will never ever marry you. Right? Without your consent, I'll never make you part of India. Wow. That promise they fulfill in Cripps mission, right? In August offer, in Cripps mission, in cabinet mission, in Dickey Bird plan, in Mountbatten plan. Bhai, such kind of promise to bhai maine British ka ye dekha, which is anti-India, but promise, right? So therefore that is complication, right? So therefore on that note we end our discussion of the previous 5-year questions, right? So thank you, God bless you, take care, thank you for your time, and my regrets that I took some time extra.